Nicholas Bellini hated loose ends. That was the only reason he cut the Chicago deal short, closed negotiations 2 days ahead of schedule, and caught a red-eye back to Manhattan. The satisfaction of watching grown men sign contracts under duress should have carried him through the flight. But something itched beneath his skin, a feeling he couldn't name and didn't trust. The SUV dropped him at the entrance of his building at 2 a.m. The doorman straightened immediately, recognition flashing across his face before he schooled his expression into practiced neutrality. "Mr. Bellini, we weren't expecting you until Thursday." Nicholas didn't respond. He rarely did to observations that required no answer. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent, except for the mechanical hum of cables and gears. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the tension of 3 days spent in boardrooms and backrooms where deals were sealed with threats disguised as promises. The elevator doors opened directly into his foyer. Home. Sanctuary. The one place in this city where he controlled every variable, every entrance, every breath of air that moved through the space. Except something was wrong. Nicholas froze, one hand instinctively moving to the weapon holstered at his hip. Years of survival had taught him to read spaces the way other men read books. Every detail mattered. Every object out of place was a potential threat. Women's shoes sat by the entrance. Small, worn sneakers that looked like they'd been walked in for miles. Not designer, not expensive. Definitely not his sister's style. His eyes tracked to the living room. A canvas tote bag rested on his leather sofa, contents spilling out. A water bottle. A paperback novel with a cracked spine. Keys attached to a cheap keychain. Lights spilled from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Not the ambient glow of security lighting he'd programmed, but the harsh brightness of someone who'd turned on every switch. Nicholas drew his gun. The weight felt familiar in his palm, an extension of his hand. He moved through the penthouse with practiced silence, checking angles, clearing corners. The kitchen was empty, the dining room untouched. His office door remained closed, security panel still armed. That left the bedrooms. He approached the master suite, weapon raised, senses heightened to a razor's edge. The door stood ajar. Inside, he could hear water running. Not the aggressive spray of a shower, but the gentler sound of a bathtub being filled. Nicholas kicked the bathroom door open, gun trained on the space beyond, and froze. A woman stood in front of the mirror, wrapped in nothing but one of his white towels. Steam curled around her like smoke, droplets of water clinging to her shoulders and collarbone. Her hair hung wet and dark against her neck, several shades deeper than its natural color. She screamed. The sound was raw and genuine, born of pure terror. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the marble wall, hands clutching the towel tighter against her chest. Nicholas lowered the gun but didn't holster it. His heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline still flooding his system. He forced his breathing to steady, forced his voice to emerge cold and controlled. "Who the hell are you?" The woman's eyes were wide, blue and terrified, darting between his face and the weapon in his hand. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She was shaking, he realized. Full body tremors that made the towel slip slightly before she caught it. "I asked you a question." He kept his tone flat, dangerous. "You have 3 seconds to explain why you're in my home before I call security." "I'm Lauren." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Lauren Mitchell. I'm friends with Gabriella. Your sister. She said I could stay here. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you'd be back. She said you were traveling until Thursday." Nicholas's jaw clenched. "Gabriella." Of course. His sister had a habit of making decisions without consulting him, but this crossed every line he'd drawn. "Show me proof." Lauren's eyes darted to the counter where her phone sat next to a hairbrush and various toiletries he didn't recognize. She moved slowly, keeping the towel secured with one hand while reaching for the device with the other. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the screen and pulled up a conversation thread. She held it out to him, arm extended but body still pressed against the wall, maintaining maximum distance. Nicholas holstered his weapon and took the phone. The messages were recent, time-stamped from 2 days ago. His sister's contact photo smiled up at him from the top of the screen, that same reckless grin Gabriella had been giving him since she was 6 years old. He scrolled through the conversation. Short, urgent messages from Lauren about needing somewhere safe. Gabriella's responses were immediate and certain. Use Nico's place. He won't mind. I have the spare key. Code is 4739. Stay as long as you need. She gave you the security code. His voice was granite. Yes. Lauren's response was barely a whisper, and didn't think to mention this to me. I think she tried to call you. She said you weren't answering. Nicholas's teeth ground together. He'd been in meetings. Deep in negotiations where phones stayed off and attention remained absolute. Gabriella knew that. She'd made this decision anyway. Put a stranger in his home, compromised his security, and apparently thought he'd just accept it. He thrust the phone back at Lauren, who took it with still trembling fingers. Get dressed. I'm sorry? I'm not having this conversation while you're wrapped in a towel. Put clothes on. Now. She nodded quickly, edging along the wall toward the door. He stepped aside to let her pass, catching a hint of his own soap on her skin. She'd used his shower, his products, invaded the one space that was supposed to be entirely his. There are clothes in the guest room closet, he added, voice clipped. My sister keeps things here. Lauren disappeared down the hallway, moving fast. Nicholas heard the guest room door close, the lock engage. Smart. She should be afraid. She should be terrified of what she'd walked into. He pulled out his phone and called Gabriella. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Instead, he fired off a text. Call me. Now. While he waited, Nicholas moved through the penthouse again, this time analyzing with different eyes. The shoes by the door weren't just worn. They were cheap, the kind bought out of necessity rather than choice. The contents of the tote bag told a story. Protein bars, a half-empty bottle of ibuprofen, the novel with its broken spine suggesting it had been read and reread, and in the living room, partially hidden beneath a throw pillow, he found a phone charger and wallet. He opened the wallet. Inside was a driver's license showing Lauren Mitchell's face. Younger, but recognizable. Age 27. Address in Brooklyn. $63 in cash and a maxed-out credit card. Nicholas set the wallet down carefully. He was beginning to understand what Gabriella had done, and why she'd done it without asking permission. The guest room door opened. Lauren emerged wearing clothes that hung loose on her frame. Gabriella's sweatpants pooled around Lauren's ankles, held up by the drawstring tied tight. The hoodie was several sizes too large, sleeves covering her hands. She stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, looking younger than 27, looking like someone who'd been running and had finally stopped. Sit. Nicholas gestured to the living room. She moved past him, giving him a wide berth, and perched on the edge of the sofa. He took the chair across from her, maintaining distance but keeping her in full view. Start from the beginning, he said, and don't leave anything out. Lauren swallowed hard. Her hands twisted in the oversized sleeves. I needed somewhere safe. Somewhere my ex-boyfriend wouldn't find me. Gabriella offered your place because you were traveling. Your ex-boyfriend. Nicholas leaned back, expression neutral. Why would he be looking for you? Because I left him. 3 days ago. He doesn't like when things don't go his way. That's not an answer. Lauren's jaw tightened. For the first time since he'd found her, something besides fear flashed in her eyes. Anger, maybe. Or exhaustion. Ryan is controlling. He was controlling. He monitored my phone, my computer, my bank accounts. He decided what I wore, where I went, who I could talk to. When I told him I was leaving, he locked me in the apartment for 2 days. Nicholas's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his chest. How did you get out? He had to go to work. I broke the window in the bathroom and climbed down the fire escape. She pushed up the sleeves of the hoodie as she spoke, revealing her wrists. Dark bruises circled both, finger-shaped marks that made Nicholas's hands curl into fists. So you ran to Gabriella. She's my best friend. Has been since college. She's the only person Ryan didn't succeed in cutting out of my life completely. Lauren's voice wavered. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Nicholas stood and walked to his office, unlocking the door with a code Lauren couldn't see. Inside, he accessed the security system and pulled up the footage from the past 48 hours. There she was, arriving at 2:30 in the afternoon 2 days ago. The camera showed her stepping off the elevator, jumping at the chime, looking around with wide eyes before entering the code Gabriella had given her. She'd been carrying only the tote bag, wearing the same clothes she'd been wearing when he found her. He fast-forwarded through the footage, Lauren making herself small in his space, sleeping on the sofa instead of the guest bed for the first night, eating sparingly from his kitchen, spending hours in the bathtub like she was trying to wash something off that wouldn't come clean. Nicholas closed the security feed and returned to the living room. Lauren hadn't moved, still perched on the edge of the sofa like she might need to run at any moment. "You've been here 2 days." "Yes. And your ex-boyfriend." "Ryan. Does he know you're here?" "No. God, no. Gabriella was the only person I told and she wouldn't tell him anything." Lauren's eyes widened. "He doesn't know, does he?" "Not yet." Nicholas pulled out his phone again. Still no response from Gabriella. But men like that don't stop looking. And if he has the resources you're suggesting, he'll find you eventually. Lauren's face went pale. She looked like she might be sick. "I'll leave. Right now. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have put you in this position. It's 3 a.m. I don't care. I'll find somewhere else." "With $63 and a maxed credit card?" She flinched. "You went through my wallet. This is my home. Nothing here is private from me." Nicholas's voice was steel. "Sit down." Lauren had started to stand. She sank back onto the sofa, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I need to know more about Ryan," Nicholas continued. "Full name, where he works, what resources he has access to." "Why?" "Because my sister put you in my home, which makes you my responsibility until you leave it. And I protect what's mine." The words hung in the air between them. Lauren stared at him, trying to read past the cold mask he wore. She wouldn't find anything. Nicholas had spent years perfecting that control. "Ryan Foster," she finally said. "He works for some kind of import-export company. I don't know the details. He never talked about work, and when I asked questions, he'd get angry." Nicholas knew several import-export companies in this city. Most of them were fronts for operations that had nothing to do with legitimate trade. Does he have family? Friends? People he'd go to for help finding you? His father has money. Real money. Ryan uses that to his advantage. Lauren's hands twisted together. And he has a sister. Melissa. My sister. He's threatened to hurt her if I ever tried to leave. That was the detail that crystallized everything. Nicholas understood now why Gabriella had acted without permission. His sister knew him well enough to know he couldn't turn away from this. "Your sister? Where is she?" "Brooklyn?" "She's in nursing school at SUNY. She lives in the dorms." Nicholas made a note in his phone. He'd have someone checking on the sister by morning. If Ryan Foster was the kind of man who threatened women through their families, he was exactly the kind of problem Nicholas knew how to handle. "You'll stay here," he said, "until we figure this out. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm telling you." Nicholas stood, signaling the conversation was over. "The guest room is yours. Don't answer the door. Don't go near the windows. And don't leave this apartment without telling me first." Lauren nodded slowly, processing the sudden shift in her circumstances. "Thank you," she whispered. Nicholas didn't respond. He walked back to his office, already pulling up contacts on his phone. People who owed him favors. People who specialized in finding information others wanted hidden. Behind him, he heard Lauren move toward the guest room, her footsteps soft on his floors. The door closed quietly, lock engaging once again. Nicholas stared at the security monitor showing the empty hallway. 2 days ago, his biggest concern had been closing a deal in Chicago. Now he had a terrified woman in his guest room, an ex-boyfriend who sounded like a serious threat, and a sister who'd made decisions that would require a long conversation. He pulled up Gabriella's contact one more time. Still no response. Nicholas set the phone down and leaned back in his chair. The smart thing would be to send Lauren somewhere else. A hotel, a safe house. Anywhere that didn't compromise his security or draw attention to his home. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see were those bruises on her wrists. Those wide, terrified eyes when she'd seen his gun. The way she'd tried to make herself small, like disappearing was the only safety she knew. No, Lauren Mitchell wasn't going anywhere. Not until he made sure Ryan Foster understood exactly what happened to men who put their hands on women. Nicholas opened a new message thread and began typing. By morning, he'd know everything there was to know about Ryan Foster, and then he'd decide exactly how to handle this situation. Dawn broke over Manhattan with the kind of cold clarity that made the city look sharp enough to cut. Nicholas hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford when variables remained uncontrolled, and right now, everything about this situation felt wildly out of his control. He sat in his office, 3 monitors glowing in the pre-dawn darkness, information streaming across screens faster than most people could process. But Nicholas wasn't most people. He'd built his empire on the ability to see patterns others missed, to find weaknesses in systems designed to be impenetrable. Ryan Foster's life was surprisingly easy to crack open. 34 years old. Sales director at Meridian Import Solutions, a company Nicholas recognized immediately. They moved containers through the port of Newark, containers that sometimes held more than the manifests claimed. He made a note to have someone look deeper into Foster's connections there. The man's social media painted a picture of carefully curated success. Photos at expensive restaurants. Gym selfies showing off a physique maintained through obsessive routine. And in the older posts, before they'd been deleted but not before Nicholas's people had archived them, pictures of Lauren. She looked different in those images. Smaller somehow, even though the physical dimensions were the same. She smiled in the photos, but the expression never reached her eyes. A detail Nicholas noticed because he'd spent years learning to read the subtle languages of fear and control. The bruises on her wrists made sense now. Ryan Foster was exactly the kind of man Nicholas had spent his adult life dealing with. Men who mistook cruelty for strength, who needed to dominate because they had no real power of their own. Nicholas opened a new search window and pulled up information on Melissa Mitchell. 23, nursing student, Dean's List every semester. She lived in a dormitory on the SUNY campus, a building with minimal security and too many access points. Easy target if Foster decided to use her as leverage. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Marco, one of his most reliable men. Need eyes on SUNY Brooklyn, dorm building C. Female student Melissa Mitchell. Discreet surveillance only. Report anyone showing unusual interest. The response came back within 2 minutes. On it, boss. Nicholas set the phone down and rubbed his eyes. The exhaustion he'd been pushing away for the past 4 hours tried to creep in, but he forced it back. He couldn't afford to be tired. Not when someone vulnerable was sleeping 20 feet away, depending on security measures she didn't even know existed yet. A sound from the hallway made him look up. Soft footsteps, hesitant and careful. Lauren was awake. He checked the time on his laptop. 6:30. She'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, probably less than he had. Nicholas stood and moved to the kitchen, a space he rarely used but kept immaculately stocked by his housekeeper. If Lauren was going to be here, she needed to eat. That much he could control. He found eggs, bread, coffee. Basic things. He wasn't a chef, but years of living alone before money solved most problems had taught him the fundamentals. By the time Lauren emerged from the guest room, dressed in the same oversized clothes from last night, he'd assembled something that resembled breakfast. She stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, taking in the scene with obvious surprise. Nicholas at the stove, 2 plates on the counter, coffee already brewing. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "You need to eat." He slid one of the plates toward her without looking up from the pan. "Sit." Lauren moved to one of the bar stools and sat slowly, like she expected the offer to be revoked at any moment. She picked up the fork and took a small bite of scrambled eggs, chewing carefully. Nicholas poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her before taking his own to the opposite side of the counter. Physical distance. Necessary boundaries. "Thank you," Lauren said after a moment of silence, "for letting me stay. For all of this. Don't thank me yet." Nicholas's tone was flat. "We need to establish some rules." She set down her fork, giving him her full attention. Those blue eyes were clearer this morning, less wild with fear, but still carrying a wariness that probably wouldn't fade for a long time. "You don't leave this apartment," he continued. "Not to go downstairs, not to check the mail, not for any reason unless I explicitly approve it first." Lauren nodded slowly. "You don't answer the door. If someone rings the buzzer, you ignore it." My security knows not to let anyone up without my permission, but I don't take chances. Okay. Stay away from the windows. The glass is bulletproof, but that doesn't mean you should be visible from the street. He paused, making sure she understood the weight behind each instruction. These aren't suggestions, Lauren. They're requirements if you're going to be here. I understand. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the coffee cup. Nicholas watched her drink, noting the way she cupped the mug with both hands like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She wore no jewelry except a simple silver necklace with a small pendant that caught the morning light. I need to go out today, he said. Arrange some things. You'll be alone here for a few hours. I'll be fine. I'm also adding extra security to the building. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Lauren's brow furrowed slightly. Is that necessary? I mean, Ryan doesn't know I'm here? Yet. Nicholas set his coffee down with deliberate precision. Your ex-boyfriend doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily. And if Gabriella was the only person you told, he'll eventually think to question her. The color drained from Lauren's face. I didn't think about that. That's why I'm thinking about it for you. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo he'd compiled from public records. This is Ryan Foster, correct? Lauren glanced at the screen and immediately looked away, jaw tight. Yes. Nicholas pocketed the phone. The reaction told him everything he needed to know about how deep the fear ran. There's something else, Lauren said, voice barely above a whisper. About my sister, Melissa. Ryan knows where she goes to school. He's mentioned it before. Said he could find her anytime he wanted. I'm worried that if he can't find me, he'll go after her. Nicholas had been waiting for this. He'd already made the decision to protect Melissa Mitchell, but Lauren didn't need to know that yet. Information was currency, and he spent it carefully. Where does she live? SUNY Brooklyn. Dorm building C, 3rd floor. I'll make sure she's safe. Lauren's head snapped up. How? You don't even know her. I know people. That's enough. Nicholas stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Finish eating. I'll be in my office making calls. He walked away before she could ask more questions, before he could see the gratitude and confusion warring on her face. Gratitude made him uncomfortable. People thanked him for things he did out of calculation, not kindness. Back in his office, Nicholas pulled up a secure messaging app and contacted his attorney. Need a file started on Ryan Foster. Employment records, financial history, anything that can be used for leverage. And I want to know if he has a criminal record. The response was immediate. This personal or business? Both, Nicholas typed back. Consider it done. He spent the next hour making similar arrangements, pulling threads that would eventually weave into a complete picture of Ryan Foster's life. By the time Nicholas finished, he had surveillance on Melissa Mitchell, a private investigator digging into Foster's background, and security briefed on potential threats to watch for. The morning sun climbed higher, filling his office with natural light he usually ignored. But today, it made him aware of how little sleep he'd actually gotten, how the events of the past few hours had disrupted the careful routine he'd built. His phone buzzed. Finally. Gabriella. He answered on the first ring. Start talking. Good morning to you too, Nico. His sister's voice carried forced cheerfulness that immediately grated on his nerves. You gave a stranger access to my home. My security codes. My private space. Nicholas kept his voice low, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. Without asking. Without even a courtesy call. I tried calling. You didn't answer. That's not permission, Gabriella. I know. Her tone shifted, losing the false brightness. I know, and I'm sorry. But you didn't see her, Nico. She showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m. with bruises all over and nowhere else to go. What was I supposed to do? Nicholas pinched the bridge of his nose. You were supposed to call me back. Leave a message. Send a text. Any form of communication that didn't involve compromising my security. Would you have said yes? The question hung between them. They both knew the answer. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Gabriella's voice rose, passionate and defensive. Lauren is my best friend. She's been trapped with that bastard for 2 years, and when she finally got the courage to leave, I wasn't going to turn her away because you might say no. Nicholas heard movement in the hallway outside his office. Lauren, probably trying not to eavesdrop, but unable to help hearing raised voices through the partially open door. He switched to the language they'd grown up speaking, Italian rolling off his tongue with the ease of childhood habit. You put her at risk by bringing her here. You put yourself at risk. And you did it without thinking about the consequences. Gabriella responded in kind, her accent sharper than his. I thought about the consequences of doing nothing. That seemed worse. They argued for another 5 minutes, voices rising and falling in the rapid-fire exchange of two people who'd spent their entire lives pushing each other's buttons. Nicholas catalogued every point where Gabriella had acted recklessly, every decision made from emotion rather than logic. She countered with every time he'd prioritized control over compassion, safety over humanity. Finally, Gabriella's voice softened. Is she okay? Lauren? Is she safe? Nicholas glanced toward the hallway. He could see Lauren's shadow, hovering just out of sight. She's fine. She'll stay here until we figure this out. Thank you. Gabriella's relief was audible. I know I should have asked. I know I messed up. But thank you for taking care of her anyway. Nicholas ended the call without responding to the gratitude. He set the phone down and found Lauren standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself in that defensive posture he was starting to recognize. I understood some of that, she said carefully. Enough to know she was defending me. My sister makes impulsive decisions. Usually, I'm left cleaning up the aftermath. Nicholas stood and moved past her into the hallway. This time is no different. I'm not a mess that needs cleaning up. He stopped, turning to face her. She'd straightened her spine, chin lifted slightly in defiance. Good. Fear was necessary for survival, but too much of it made people weak. No, he agreed. You're a complication. There's a difference. Lauren flinched at the bluntness, but didn't back down. Then let me leave. I'll find somewhere else to go. You don't owe me anything. I told you last night. You're my responsibility now. That doesn't change because it's inconvenient. I don't want to be anyone's responsibility. What you want stopped mattering the moment you used my security code. Nicholas's voice was cold, final. You're here. You'll follow my rules. And when it's safe for you to leave, I'll tell you. Until then, stop arguing with the only person keeping you alive. The words landed like blows. Lauren's defiance crumbled, replaced by exhausted acceptance. She nodded once and retreated back toward the guest room. Nicholas watched her go, then checked his watch. Almost noon. Time to make good on his promise to secure the building. He left the apartment, taking the elevator down to the lobby where building management kept offices. The conversation with security took less than 10 minutes. Additional cameras, more frequent patrols, a list of approved visitors that currently contained exactly 0 names. Money smoothed over any questions about why the sudden increase in precautions. On his way back upstairs, Nicholas received a message from Marco. Eyes on the sister. All clear so far. We'll maintain position. Good. 1 variable controlled. Back in the apartment, Nicholas found Lauren exactly where he'd left her, curled up on the guest bed with her phone. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway. Your sister is being watched, he said without preamble. Discreetly. She won't know. But if Ryan Foster goes anywhere near her, I'll know about it. Lauren's eyes widened. You did that already? In the last few hours? I don't wait when it comes to security. Nicholas leaned against the doorframe. Your things. From your old apartment. I'm assuming you want them. I don't want to put anyone at risk by going back there. That's why you're not going. I'll send someone. Ryan might be watching the building. Let him watch. Nicholas pulled out his phone. Make a list of what you need. Essential items only. Someone will retrieve them when it's safe. Lauren hesitated, then started typing on her phone. After a minute, she showed him the screen. Clothes, toiletries, a few books, laptop, external hard drive with her work files. What kind of work? Nicholas asked. I teach art. Elementary school. Or I did. Lauren's expression clouded. Ryan made me quit last year. Said I was spending too much time with other people. Another detail that crystallized the full picture of Ryan Foster's control. Nicholas made a mental note to add it to the growing file. Send me that list. I'll handle it. He turned to leave, then paused. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself. And Lauren? She looked up. Stop apologizing for existing here. It's exhausting. He left before she could respond, closing the door to his office and returning to the screens that showed him everything he needed to know about the world outside. Information flowed in throughout the afternoon. Foster had indeed hired a private investigator, a man named Reeves who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. Nicholas had files on Reeves within an hour, including details about 3 affairs, 2 gambling debts, and a daughter at Columbia who didn't know her father's line of work. Leverage, always useful. As evening approached, Nicholas emerged from his office to find Lauren in the living room, photo albums spread across the coffee table. She looked up guiltily when he entered. "I'm sorry. I was looking at the bookshelf and found these. I shouldn't have." "It's fine." Nicholas moved closer, recognizing the albums. His housekeeper must have left them out during her last organizing spree. "Those are old." "Is this Gabriella?" Lauren pointed to a photo of a young girl with dark braids, grinning at the camera with missing front teeth. 8 years old, just after she broke her arm trying to prove she could skateboard better than the boys in our neighborhood. A smile tugged at Lauren's lips. "That sounds like her." She flipped the page, revealing more photos. A teenage Nicholas, already tall and serious-eyed even then. Family gatherings, graduations, life documented in careful chronological order. "You looked so young here." Lauren touched a photo of Nicholas at 15. Suit ill-fitting, jaw set in a determined line. "That was my father's funeral." Nicholas's voice was neutral, fact without emotion. Lauren's hand jerked back like the photo had burned her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I told you to stop apologizing." He closed the album gently. It was a long time ago, but Lauren was looking at him differently now, seeing past the cold exterior to something underneath. The shift made Nicholas uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. "I should start dinner," he said, retreating toward the kitchen. Lauren followed. "I can help. Do you know how to cook?" "Basic things. Ryan didn't like when I spent too much time in the kitchen. Said I was avoiding him." Nicholas pulled ingredients from the refrigerator without commenting on that particular detail. He was building a comprehensive understanding of Ryan Foster's methods of control, and each new piece of information made Nicholas's jaw clench tighter. They worked in silence, Lauren chopping vegetables while Nicholas handled the meat. It was strange having someone else in his space, moving through his kitchen, existing in the carefully controlled environment he'd built. Strange, but not entirely unwelcome. That thought bothered him more than he wanted to admit. They ate at the dining table, Lauren still swimming in Gabriella's oversized clothes, picking at her food with the appetite of someone who'd spent too long in survival mode. Nicholas watched her over the rim of his wine glass, noting details, the way she checked her phone every few minutes, the tension in her shoulders that never fully released, the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "When's the last time you slept through the night?" he asked. Lauren looked up, startled by the personal question. "I don't know. Months, maybe. You're safe here. Sleep." That's easier said than done. Nicholas understood that better than she knew. Safety was a concept, not a feeling. It lived in the mind, and minds were hard to convince once fear had taken root. After dinner, Lauren retreated to the guest room while Nicholas returned to his office. He worked until past midnight, coordinating surveillance, reviewing files, building the case against Ryan Foster that would eventually make the man understand exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. Around 1 a.m, Nicholas heard the television turn on in the living room. He found Lauren there, curled up on the sofa with a throw blanket, watching some old movie with the volume low. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I think I hear him." Outside the door, coming down the hallway. "I know it's not logical, but fear isn't logical." Nicholas sat in the chair across from her, maintaining the distance that seemed necessary. "It takes time to convince your brain that the threat is gone." "Is it gone? The threat?" "Not yet, but it will be." Lauren studied him in the dim light of the television. "Who are you, Nicholas Bellini?" "Someone who keeps his promises." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you need right now." She didn't push, just returned her attention to the screen. Nicholas stayed, telling himself he was monitoring the situation, ensuring she felt secure. But some deeper part of him, The part that wasn't entirely cold calculation recognized the truth. Lauren Mitchell had walked into his life by accident, but keeping her there was starting to feel like a choice. Eventually, she fell asleep on the sofa, breathing deep and even. Nicholas stood and retrieved a heavier blanket from the closet, draping it over her carefully. She stirred, but didn't wake, her face softening in sleep. He stood there longer than necessary, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, the way her hand curled beneath her chin like a child's. Vulnerable, trusting him in a way she shouldn't. Nicholas returned to his office and pulled up the surveillance feeds again. Melissa Mitchell's dorm building was quiet. His man in position across the street, Ryan Foster's apartment, showed no unusual activity. All variables accounted for, all threats monitored. But something had shifted in the past 24 hours. Something Nicholas couldn't control or predict. For the first time in years, someone else's safety mattered more than his own convenience. He wasn't sure what to do with that realization, so he did what he always did when emotions threatened control. He buried it under work, under strategy, under the cold logic that had kept him alive this long. Tomorrow would bring new complications. Tonight, at least, Lauren Mitchell could sleep without fear. Nicholas could handle one night. The third morning arrived with the peculiar rhythm of forced domesticity. Lauren woke to muted voices drifting through the penthouse, low and urgent. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself in the guest room that was beginning to feel less foreign. Cream-colored walls, floor-to-ceiling windows with blackout curtains she kept drawn, the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 43 stories below. She pulled on Gabriella's sweatshirt and padded barefoot down the hallway. Nicholas's office door stood partially open, warm light spilling across dark hardwood floors. His voice carried through the gap, speaking in rapid Italian that Lauren could only partially follow. Business, she assumed. Or the other things he did that fell into shadows she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. The kitchen was pristine, untouched since they'd cleaned up dinner the night before. Lauren moved through the space with growing confidence. No longer afraid to open cabinets or use the expensive espresso machine that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to be. She ground beans, the mechanical sound filling the silence, and watched dark liquid drip into 2 white ceramic cups. The conversation in the office stopped. Footsteps approached. Nicholas appeared in the doorway, phone still in his hand, dark hair slightly disheveled from running his fingers through it. He wore black dress pants and a white shirt, sleeves already rolled to his elbows despite the early hour. His eyes tracked to the coffee cups, then to her face. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to be useful." Lauren slid 1 cup across the counter toward him. "Besides, you've made breakfast twice now. This is the least I can do." He picked up the cup and took a sip, eyes never leaving hers over the rim. "It's good. My one marketable skill, making coffee." She attempted a smile that felt brittle on her face. "Well, that and teaching 8-year-olds about finger painting, though I'm currently unemployed, so maybe neither skill is particularly marketable." Nicholas set the cup down with deliberate care. "About that. Your job. Did you quit, or did Ryan make you quit?" Lauren's grip tightened on her own cup. "Why does it matter?" "It matters." She looked away, studying the grain pattern in the marble countertop. "He said I was spending too much time with other people's children, that I was using work as an excuse to avoid him. He made me call the principal and resign while he listened on speakerphone." The muscle in Nicholas's jaw flexed, the only visible reaction to information that clearly affected him more than he showed. When was this? Last March, 13 months ago. The timeline was burned into her memory, another marker in the slow erosion of her life. After that, I wasn't allowed to leave the apartment without him. He said it was for my safety, that the neighborhood was dangerous. But really, it was just another way to keep track of where I was every minute of every day. Nicholas's phone buzzed against the counter. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted, something cold and focused sliding into place. "That's my attorney," he said, already moving back toward his office. "Wait here." He disappeared through the doorway, and Lauren heard the conversation resume, this time in English, clipped and professional. She caught fragments. Legal implications, and filing false reports, and leverage if needed. Her stomach twisted. Whatever Nicholas was doing, it involved lawyers and strategy and resources she couldn't begin to comprehend. Part of her wanted to know every detail. Another part, the part still learning to trust, worried about what debts she might be accumulating without realizing it. 10 minutes later, Nicholas emerged with an expression that made Lauren's pulse spike. "What is it?" she asked. "What happened?" "Your ex-boyfriend filed a police report yesterday." Nicholas's voice was controlled, factual, claiming you stole $15,000 from him before you left. He circulated your photo to local precincts and hired a private investigator to find you. The room tilted slightly. Lauren gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "That's not true. I didn't take anything from him. I barely escaped with my purse." "I know." Nicholas moved closer, not touching, but solid and grounding in his certainty. "The report is fabricated. My attorney is already working on documentation to prove it, but that's not what concerns me right now. What concerns you? Ryan Foster also mentioned your sister in the report. Said she might know your whereabouts. Said he's concerned she might be in danger if you're having some kind of mental health crisis." Lauren's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile floor. Brown liquid spread across white stone like blood. "Melissa," she whispered. "He's going after Melissa. He's laying groundwork." Nicholas pulled out his phone, already typing, creating a narrative that makes him look like the concerned boyfriend, and you look unstable. It's calculated. "I have to warn her. I have to call her right now." Lauren lunged for the phone Nicholas had given her 2 nights ago, but he caught her wrist, gentle but immovable. "Not yet. Wait." "Wait?" Her voice rose, panic sharp and cutting. "He knows where she lives. He knows her schedule. If he goes to her campus, if he convinces her that I'm in trouble, he won't get near her." Nicholas released her wrist and turned his phone screen toward her. "A text conversation with someone named Marco. I've had surveillance on your sister since the morning after you arrived. She's protected." Lauren stared at the screen, reading messages about shift changes and all clear reports and coordinates that mapped to Melissa's dorm building. The timestamps went back 48 hours. "You've been watching her," Lauren said slowly, "for 2 days. And you didn't tell me. I didn't want to worry you until there was something concrete to worry about. That's not your decision to make." The anger surprised her, hot and sudden after days of careful gratitude. "She's my sister. I have a right to know when she's being watched by strangers. They're not strangers. They're professionals who work for me. That's not better, Nicholas. That's worse." Lauren stepped back, putting distance between them. "You can't just make decisions about my family without telling me. You can't control every variable in my life just because I'm staying in your apartment." Something flickered across Nicholas's face. Not anger, but something close to it. Frustration, maybe, or the kind of cold calculation that preceded difficult conversations. "Sit down," he said. "I don't want to sit down." "Lauren, sit." She sat, more from the exhaustion of constant fear than from obedience. Nicholas remained standing, towering over her in a way that should have felt threatening, but somehow didn't. "I'm going to ask you questions," he began, "and I need you to answer them honestly, even if it's painful. Can you do that?" "Why?" "Because I can't protect you if I don't understand what I'm protecting you from." Lauren wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she couldn't quite suppress. "Fine. Ask. How long were you with Ryan?" 2 years. A little more. When did the control start? She had to think about that, trace back through memory to find the precise moment when concern became possession. Maybe 6 months in. Little things at first. He wanted me to text him when I got to work, when I left, who I was with, said it made him feel better to know I was safe. And you thought that was care. At first, yes. Shame heated her face. By the time I realized it wasn't care, it was too late. He had access to my bank account. He'd convinced me to move in with him, so I'd given up my old apartment. My friends had stopped calling because I always had excuses for why I couldn't see them. Nicholas listened without interruption, his focus absolute. When she paused, he prompted with another question. "Did he ever hit you?" "No, not with his fists." Lauren's hands twisted in her lap. "But there were other things. Blocking doorways so I couldn't leave a room until he decided the argument was over. Holding my wrists when he wanted me to listen. Breaking things I cared about when he was angry." The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow-green, but Nicholas's eyes tracked to them anyway. "Your phone," he continued. You said he monitored it. How? Some app he installed. I didn't even know it was there until I found it by accident last month. He could see every call, every text, every website I visited. He knew where I was at all times through GPS tracking. That's illegal in New York without consent. I know that now. I didn't know it then, or if I did, I was too scared to do anything about it. Lauren met his gaze, willing him to understand. You have to realize, by the end, I wasn't thinking clearly. He'd spent 2 years convincing me that everything was my fault, that I was lucky he loved me despite how difficult I was. I believed him. Nicholas's expression remained neutral, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. She wondered what he was thinking, what judgment he was forming about her weakness, her stupidity, all the ways she'd failed to save herself. Your family, Nicholas said instead. Parents. Dead. Car accident when I was 19. Melissa was 14. I raised her after that, or tried to. Put her through high school while I finished college. She's the only family I have left. And Ryan knew that. Yes, he knew exactly how to threaten me. Knew I'd do anything to keep her safe. Nicholas nodded slowly, processing information, building some kind of internal framework she couldn't see. He pulled out his phone again and made a call, speaking to someone about background checks and financial records and surveillance footage from specific dates. All business, all cold efficiency. When he finished, he looked at Lauren with something that might have been approval. You're stronger than you think you are, he said. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about how you feel. It's about what you do despite how you feel. You left him. That took more courage than staying ever would have. The unexpected validation made her throat tight. She blinked against the burn of tears and forced herself to breathe. Thank you, she managed, for understanding, for not making me feel stupid about how long I stayed. People who haven't been in that situation don't get to judge how you survived it. Nicholas moved to the shattered coffee cup on the floor and began picking up pieces, depositing them in his palm with careful precision. I'm going out this afternoon. I have some things to acquire for you. What things? Tools, electronics. Things you need that can't be traced back to you. He dumped the broken ceramic in the trash and washed his hands. While I'm gone, you'll stay here. Don't answer the door. Don't go on the balcony. Same rules as before. How long will you be gone? 2 hours. Maybe 3. Lauren nodded, anxiety already building at the thought of being alone in the massive penthouse. Nicholas seemed to sense it because he crossed the kitchen and stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You're safe here, he said quietly. The building security is on my payroll. The doors are reinforced. The windows are bulletproof. Nothing and no one can get to you without going through me first. What if Ryan finds out I'm here? Then he'll make the last mistake of his life. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they settled something restless in her chest. A wild thing that had been running for too long and was finally allowed to stop. Nicholas left an hour later, disappearing into the elevator with final instructions that Lauren barely heard. She spent the afternoon moving through the penthouse like a ghost, touching expensive furniture and examining artwork that probably belonged in museums. Everything here spoke of wealth, accumulated through methods she didn't want to examine too closely. She ended up in front of a painting hung in the hallway, abstract shapes in burgundy and gold that reminded her of her own abandoned dreams. Before Ryan, she'd wanted to paint, had filled notebooks with sketches and color studies, had imagined a life where art was more than just something she taught to children. When Nicholas returned, he found her there, staring at the canvas with an expression he couldn't quite read. You like it? He asked. Lauren startled, not having heard him arrive. It's beautiful. Whoever painted this understood color theory at an instinctual level. Nicholas set down several shopping bags and moved to stand beside her. My mother painted it. Years ago before she died. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... Stop apologizing. But his voice was softer now, lacking its usual sharp edge. She would have liked hearing someone appreciate it. Most people just see expensive decoration. It's more than that. It's freedom captured on canvas. Look at how the colors flow without constraint. Nicholas studied her profile instead of the painting. Is that what you see? Freedom? That's what she felt when she painted it. You can tell. They stood in silence, shoulders almost touching, both looking at the same painting but seeing different things. Finally, Nicholas stepped back and retrieved the shopping bags. "Come here. I want to show you something." Lauren followed him to the dining table where he began removing items. A brand new laptop, sleek and compact. A cell phone still in its packaging. A tablet, charging cables and cases. "These are registered under a corporate account that can't be traced to you," Nicholas explained. "The phone has a secure operating system. The laptop comes with VPN software already installed. Nothing you do on these devices can be tracked by Ryan or anyone else." Lauren touched the phone box with tentative fingers. "This is too much." "It's necessary. You need to be able to communicate safely. Check email. Look for jobs eventually. Live your life without constantly looking over your shoulder. I can't afford any of this. I'm not asking you to pay for it. But I should. I can't just take—" Nicholas cut her off with a look. "Consider it an investment in my peace of mind. If you have the tools to function independently, you're less vulnerable. That makes my job easier." It was the most practical argument he could have made, one that didn't demand gratitude or create debt. Lauren found herself nodding. "Thank you," she said simply. They spent the next hour setting up the devices, Nicholas walking her through security protocols and backup systems with the patience of someone who understood technology at a fundamental level. When everything was configured, he ordered dinner from a restaurant Lauren didn't recognize, and they ate at the table while the city glittered beyond the windows. "Tell me about your life before Ryan," Nicholas said between bites. "What did you want?" The question caught Lauren off guard. No one had asked her that in years. "I wanted to paint," she admitted. "Really paint, not just teach it. I used to visit galleries every weekend, study different artists, imagine what it would feel like to see my own work hanging on those walls. Why didn't you? Money. Time. Fear that I wasn't good enough." She picked at her food. "Then Ryan happened. And wanting things for myself started to feel selfish. That's what men like him do. Convince you that your dreams are selfishness. You sound like you've dealt with men like him before." Nicholas's expression darkened. "More than I'd like. They're a particular kind of coward. The kind who needs someone weaker to make themselves feel strong. What do you do with them when you encounter them?" "I make sure they understand the hierarchy." He took a sip of wine, eyes never leaving hers. "That there are levels of power they'll never reach, and stepping above their station has consequences." It was the closest he'd come to admitting what he actually did. The business that afforded penthouses and security teams and the ability to make problems disappear. Lauren should have pressed for details, demanded honesty about what she'd walked into. Instead, she asked, "What about you? What do you want?" Nicholas considered the question longer than she expected. "Control," he finally said, "of my time, my space, my decisions. I spent too many years having those things dictated by other people. Now I make sure no one has that power over me again. Is that why you live alone?" "It's why I've always lived alone. Until 3 days ago." The acknowledgement hung between them, heavy with implication. Lauren took a careful sip of her own wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Having me here?" "It's an adjustment." Nicholas leaned back in his chair, but not an unwelcome one. They finished dinner with easier conversation, the kind that didn't carry the weight of trauma or threat. Lauren talked about museums she'd visited, artists who'd influenced her, the dream of having her own studio space someday. Nicholas listened with an attention that made her feel seen in a way she'd forgotten was possible. When they finally cleared the table, exhaustion pulled at Lauren's edges. She said goodnight and retreated to the guest room, but sleep remained elusive. The new phone sat on the nightstand, tempting and dangerous. She picked it up and navigated to a secure browser, typing her sister's name into a search engine before she could stop herself. Melissa's social media profiles were public, filled with photos of campus life and study groups, and the casual confidence of someone who didn't know danger was circling. Lauren's chest ached looking at her sister's smile, so young and unguarded. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called. Nicholas entered, carrying a steaming mug. "Thought you might want tea." "Chamomile. It helps with sleep. How did you know I was awake?" "I heard you moving around." He set the mug on the nightstand. "What are you looking at?" Lauren turned the phone screen toward him, showing Melissa's latest post from 3 hours ago. A selfie in the dorm common room, textbooks spread around her. Caption reading, "Nursing school is trying to kill me, but at least the coffee is good." "She looks happy," Nicholas observed. "She doesn't know anything. About Ryan, about me being here, about men watching her from across the street." Lauren's voice cracked. "I hate that I brought this into her life." "You didn't bring this into her life. Ryan Foster did." Nicholas sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining appropriate distance. "And tomorrow, if you want, you can call her. Use the secure phone. Tell her what's happening. She deserves to know. Will she be safe? If I contact her, the phone is untraceable, and my people will make sure she's protected whether she knows it or not." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Lauren, you're not alone in this anymore. Let that sink in." After he left, Lauren sat in the quiet dark, sipping tea that tasted like comfort and safety. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its restless energy. Inside, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the fear that usually kept her awake began to recede. She thought about Nicholas's words, about strength and survival, and the courage it took to leave. About the freedom her own mother had painted into abstract shapes before her death. About dreams that had been sleeping too long. Tomorrow she would call Melissa. Tomorrow she would start rebuilding the pieces of herself that Ryan had systematically dismantled. Tonight, she would rest in the knowledge that someone was standing between her and the darkness, someone who understood control, but wielded it differently, who saw her weakness and didn't exploit it. Lauren finished the tea and set the empty mug aside. The new phone glowed softly on her nightstand, full of possibility and connection. She plugged it in to charge, and finally let her eyes close. In his office down the hall, Nicholas reviewed surveillance footage and updated files, and made plans for tomorrow's moves in a chess game Ryan Foster didn't even know he was losing. But part of his attention remained tuned to the hallway, to the woman sleeping in his guest room, to the shift happening inside him that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with something he'd spent years avoiding. He told himself it was just responsibility, just keeping a promise to his sister, just doing what needed to be done. But the truth was beginning to surface anyway, patient and inevitable as dawn. After 5 days in the apartment, something unexpected happened. Not a crisis or a threat, but the quiet formation of routine. Nicholas found himself adjusting his schedule without conscious thought, working from the penthouse instead of his downtown office, taking calls in the early morning hours when Lauren was still asleep, emerging for breakfast at times that coincided with hers. He told himself it was practical. Monitoring the situation required proximity, but the truth sat heavier in his chest each morning when he heard her moving through his space, no longer tiptoeing like an intruder, but walking with the confidence of someone who belonged. That morning, Nicholas finished a conference call with associates in Chicago and stepped out of his office to find Lauren standing in the living room, staring at the dining table with an expression caught between confusion and something that looked dangerously close to hope. Art supplies covered the dark wood surface. Watercolor pads, professional-grade brushes still in their packaging, tubes of paint in colors that spanned the full spectrum. A portable easel leaned against a chair. Pencils, charcoal, fixative spray, everything an artist might need to actually create instead of just dream. Lauren turned when she heard his footsteps, eyes wide and questioning. "Did you do this?" she asked. Nicholas moved closer, surveying the supplies with feigned casualness. "You mentioned wanting to paint. These were delivered this morning. Nicholas, this is hundreds of dollars worth of materials. I can't accept—" "You're not accepting. You're using." He picked up one of the watercolor pads, flipping through blank pages. "Considerate payment for tolerating my presence at breakfast every morning." A laugh escaped her, surprised and genuine. "You're paying me to eat with you? I'm providing tools. What you do with them is your choice." He set the pad back down. "My housekeeper was going to throw out that corner of the guest room anyway. Might as well fill it with something useful." The lie was transparent, but Lauren didn't call him on it. Instead, she reached out and touched one of the brush handles with reverent fingers. "Thank you," she said softly. This means more than you know. Nicholas nodded once and retreated to his office, before the gratitude could settle too deeply. He had work to complete, calls to make, a situation to manage. The art supplies were strategic, a way to keep Lauren occupied and calm. Nothing more. He almost believed it. An hour later, his phone buzzed with a message from Marco. Old apartment clear. No surveillance detected. Safe to retrieve items. Nicholas stood and found Lauren in the guest room, already experimenting with the watercolors, testing colors on scrap paper with the focus of someone rediscovering a lost language. Your apartment is clear, he said from the doorway. We can get your things today. Lauren's head snapped up. Really? You're sure it's safe? My people have been monitoring it for 48 hours. Ryan hasn't been near the building. Either he's given up on that location or he's looking elsewhere. Probably elsewhere. Lauren set down her brush. He doesn't give up easily. Neither do I. Nicholas pulled out his phone. I'm having Gabriella meet my driver there. She has your spare key, correct? Yes, but I should go. I know where everything is. What's important? You're staying here. The familiar argument rose in Lauren's throat. Nicholas could see it building. But before she could launch into reasons why she should be allowed to leave the penthouse, his phone rang. Gabriella's name flashed on the screen. Your sister has impeccable timing, he muttered, answering. What? Good morning to you too, Nico. Gabriella's voice carried forced cheer. I'm outside Lauren's old building. Your very intimidating driver is here. Should I be worried? Marco? He's harmless. He's 6'4" and hasn't smiled once. Like I said. Harmless. Nicholas switched to speakerphone. You have the key? Yes. And I brought extra bags in case there's more than Lauren remembers. Papers rustled in the background. Is she okay? Can I talk to her? Nicholas held the phone toward Lauren, who took it with both hands. Gabby, you don't have to do this. Of course I do. What are friends for, if not breaking into abandoned apartments to steal back your stuff? Gabriella's tone shifted, losing its lightness. How are you, really? My brother isn't being too controlling, is he? Lauren glanced at Nicholas, who made no attempt to hide that he was listening. He's been good to me, Lauren said carefully. Better than I deserve. You deserve everything, Lauren. Don't forget that. Gabriella's voice hardened. Nico, you still there? Unfortunately. Treat her right. I mean it. She's not one of your business arrangements. Nicholas felt irritation spike in his chest. I'm aware of that. Good. Because if you hurt her, I know where you live. You're literally standing outside an apartment I own. Your threats need work. Lauren pressed her lips together to suppress a smile. The siblings bickered for another minute before Gabriella ended the call with a promise to be at the penthouse within 2 hours. Your sister is protective of you, Nicholas observed. She's the only family I had for a long time. Before Melissa, I mean. Lauren handed the phone back. She was there when I had nothing. Literally nothing. I showed up at her apartment after my parents died, with a garbage bag full of clothes and about $50 in cash. She took me in without question. Loyalty like that is rare. Which is why I need to make sure I'm not putting her in danger by being here. Nicholas pocketed his phone and leaned against the doorframe. Gabriella can handle herself. She's been navigating my world since she was old enough to understand what our family actually does. It was the most direct acknowledgement he'd made about the nature of his business. Lauren absorbed it without visible reaction. What does your family do, Nicholas? Import, export, security consulting. The answers were technically true. Various interests that require discretion. That's not a real answer. It's the one I'm giving you right now. Lauren's jaw tightened, but she didn't push. Instead, she turned back to her watercolors, dismissing him with the focus of her attention. Nicholas recognized the tactic. It was one he used himself when conversations ventured into territory he preferred to avoid. He returned to his office and pulled up the latest report from his investigator. The information that loaded on his screen made his blood run cold. Ryan Foster's connections ran deeper than anticipated. Meridian Import Solutions wasn't just moving containers through Port Newark. They were processing shipments for the Cartel del Golfo, one of Mexico's most dangerous criminal organizations. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a domestic abuser with resources. This was a man connected to people who made violence a business model. Nicholas picked up his phone and called his attorney. "Tell me you've seen the report on Foster," he said without preamble. "Just came through 10 minutes ago." This changes the situation significantly. That's an understatement. If Foster has cartel connections, he has access to resources I didn't account for. Nicholas pulled up additional files on his computer. "We need to move faster. I want everything we can use against him compiled by end of day." "Already working on it. But Nicholas, if the cartel is involved even peripherally, we need to consider bringing in federal authorities." "No, this is above your pay grade." "Nothing is above my pay grade." Nicholas's voice dropped to ice. "Foster put his hands on a woman under my protection. The cartel connection doesn't change that. It just means I need to be more creative about how I handle it." His attorney sighed. "You're going to do what you want, regardless of my advice, aren't you? That's why I pay you to make sure it's legal. Or at least defensible." Nicholas ended the call and sat back in his chair, mind working through scenarios and contingencies. A woman with cartel connections pursuing her was exponentially more dangerous than a controlling ex-boyfriend with money. The rules changed, the stakes elevated. He needed to keep Lauren close, under constant protection, until he could neutralize the threat permanently. The doorbell chimed 2 hours later. Nicholas checked the security camera and saw Gabriella standing in the hallway, arms loaded with bags and boxes, Marco behind her carrying even more. He opened the door, and Gabriella pushed past without greeting, making directly for the guest room where Lauren waited. The reunion was immediate and emotional. Nicholas stood back and watched as the women embraced, Lauren dissolving into tears against Gabriella's shoulder. His sister murmured comfort in Spanish and Italian, mixing languages the way she always did when emotions ran high. "I was so scared," Lauren sobbed. "I didn't know where else to go. You came to exactly the right place. My brother might be emotionally stunted, but he's good at keeping people safe." "I heard that," Nicholas called from the doorway. "You were meant to." Gabriella pulled back from Lauren and wiped tears from her friend's face. "Look at you. You're eating, right? Sleeping? My brother isn't working you to death as unpaid staff?" "He's been..." Lauren glanced at Nicholas. "Kind, in his own way." Gabriella followed her gaze and something shifted in her expression. She saw what Nicholas had been trying to ignore. The way Lauren looked at him with trust that hadn't been earned yet, with gratitude that made him uncomfortable, with something else he refused to name. "Nico, help me with these bags," Gabriella ordered. They carried boxes into the guest room in silence. When the last one was deposited, Gabriella grabbed his arm and pulled him into the hallway, out of Lauren's earshot. "You like her," she hissed in Italian. "I'm helping her. There's a difference. You bought her art supplies, you're working from home. You haven't kicked her out even though having her here disrupts everything about your carefully controlled life." Gabriella poked his chest. "You like her." Nicholas removed her finger with deliberate care. "What I feel is irrelevant. She needs protection. I'm providing it. Keep telling yourself that." Gabriella switched to English, voice softer. "But Nico, be careful. She's been through hell. The last thing she needs is someone else with control issues." The barb hit deeper than Nicholas wanted to admit. "I'm not Ryan Foster. I know that." "But do you?" Gabriella squeezed his arm once, then returned to the guest room where Lauren was unpacking boxes with shaking hands. Nicholas retreated to his office, Gabriella's words echoing uncomfortably in his head. He wasn't like Foster. He didn't use control to diminish people. He used it to protect them, to create order in chaos, to prevent the kind of violence that had taken his father and shaped his entire life. But the line between protection and possession was thinner than he liked to acknowledge. An hour later, after Gabriella had left with promises to visit again soon, Nicholas found Lauren in the living room. She'd spread her recovered belongings across the sofa, sorting through them with methodical care. Books, clothes, jewelry, the accumulated evidence of a life interrupted. She held a small wooden box, fingers tracing the carved lid. "My mother's," she explained without him asking. "She kept letters in here, from my father when they were dating. I thought Ryan had thrown it away, but Gabriella found it in the back of the closet." Nicholas moved closer, drawn despite himself. "You should keep that somewhere safe." "I will." Lauren opened the box and removed a stack of faded envelopes. These are the only proof I have that my parents loved each other, that good relationships exist. They do exist, just not with men like Foster. Lauren looked up at him, blue eyes searching. What about with men like you? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Nicholas should have deflected, changed the subject, reinforced the professional distance that was already eroding too quickly. Instead, he found himself answering honestly. I don't do relationships. They require vulnerability I'm not equipped for. That's not true. You're vulnerable with Gabriella. My sister is different. She's family. And I'm what? An obligation? Nicholas sat in the chair across from her, maintaining the physical distance even as emotional proximity became unavoidable. You're someone I'm choosing to help. That's more than obligation. Lauren absorbed this, setting the letters aside. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. Your father. You said you lost him to violence. What happened? Nicholas hadn't talked about his father in years. The story was known to those in his world. Part of the mythology that explained how a 15-year-old boy became the head of a criminal enterprise. But speaking it aloud to Lauren felt different, like exposing a wound that had scarred over but never fully healed. He was killed in a deal that went wrong. Rivals who wanted our territory. They made it look like an accident. But everyone knew the truth. Nicholas's voice remained steady, factual. I was 15. My mother died 2 years earlier from cancer. Gabriella was 8. Someone had to take control of the family business or everything our father built would have been absorbed by stronger organizations. So you became the boss at 15. I became what I needed to be. Lauren leaned forward. That's not the same thing. What did you want to be? The question was simple but devastating. Nicholas realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had asked what he wanted instead of what he'd achieved. It doesn't matter. I made my choices. It matters to me. Something cracked in Nicholas's chest, a fissure in the armor he'd spent decades constructing. He stood abruptly, needing distance. I should make some calls about Foster. The situation is more complicated than I initially thought. He escaped to his office before Lauren could press further, before he could say something that couldn't be unsaid. Behind the closed door, he pulled up the cartel connections again, forcing himself to focus on threats he could quantify and control. But part of his attention remained with the woman in his living room, sorting through pieces of a broken life, asking questions that had no safe answers. That night, long after Lauren had gone to bed, Nicholas sat in his office reviewing security footage and updated reports. Everything was quiet. No movement near Melissa's dorm. No sign of Foster. No immediate threats, which was exactly when Nicholas's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The scream cut through the quiet penthouse like a knife. Nicholas was on his feet and moving before conscious thought caught up. He crossed the living room in seconds, threw open the guest room door without knocking. Lauren thrashed in the bed, tangled in sheets, caught in the grip of whatever nightmare held her. Her face was wet with tears, hands raised defensively against invisible threats. No, please. I'm sorry. I won't do it again, please. Nicholas approached the bed carefully. Lauren, wake up. She didn't hear him, lost too deep in whatever hell her mind had constructed. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. Panic attack building. He sat on the edge of the bed and caught her wrists gently, pinning them without force. Lauren, you're safe. Open your eyes. She fought against his hold, still trapped between sleeping and waking. Nicholas leaned closer, voice dropping to the tone he used when calming frightened animals. You're in my apartment, in New York. Ryan can't touch you here. Open your eyes and see. Lauren's eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. It took several seconds for recognition to filter through terror. When it did, she collapsed forward, sobbing against his chest. Nicholas held her, one hand cradling the back of her head while she shook apart in his arms. This was new territory. Comfort without calculation. Touch without agenda. He'd held his sister through nightmares when she was young. But this was different. Everything about Lauren was different. I'm sorry, she gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Stop apologizing. He was here, in the dream. He found me and he was so angry. He's not here. I promise you, he's not here. Lauren's fingers clutched his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Nicholas adjusted his position, pulling her more fully into his arms, letting her weight rest against him. They stayed that way for long minutes, her breathing gradually slowing, his heartbeat steady against her ear. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and swollen, but the terror had receded. "This happens every night," she admitted. "The nightmares. I didn't want you to know how broken I am. You're not broken. You're recovering. There's a difference." "It doesn't feel different." Nicholas brushed tear-dampened hair from her face, the gesture intimate and automatic. "Recovery isn't linear. Some nights will be worse than others. That doesn't mean you're not healing." Lauren looked at him with something that made his chest constrict. Trust, yes. Gratitude, certainly. But underneath those safe emotions lurked something more dangerous. Something that mirrored the feeling Nicholas had been trying to suppress for days. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not making me feel weak. You're the furthest thing from weak." He should have left then, returned to his office, restored the appropriate boundaries. Instead, Nicholas found himself asking, "Do you want me to stay until you fall asleep?" Lauren nodded, a small movement that carried enormous weight. Nicholas settled against the headboard, and Lauren curled into his side, head on his shoulder. He told himself it was temporary, just until she felt safe. But his arm wrapped around her anyway, holding her close while her breathing deepened and sleep reclaimed her. In the quiet darkness, with Lauren's warmth pressed against him and Manhattan's lights filtering through the windows, Nicholas admitted what he'd been denying since he found her in his bathroom, wearing nothing but a towel. This woman, with her trauma and her strength and her questions he couldn't answer, had become more than a responsibility. She'd become someone he couldn't imagine leaving. 2 days passed in a strange limbo after Nicholas held Lauren through her nightmare. Neither spoke about it directly, but the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither wanted to name. Nicholas found himself hyper-aware of her presence in ways that had nothing to do with security protocols. The sound of her moving through the apartment, the scent of watercolor paint mixing with coffee, the way she'd started leaving sketches on the dining table. Small glimpses into a mind gradually remembering how to create. He worked longer hours to avoid the pull, burying himself in reports and conference calls that stretched into evening. But when he emerged, Lauren was always there, present, real, disrupting the careful isolation he'd spent years perfecting. On the second morning, Nicholas came out of his office to find Lauren standing by the windows, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke in hushed tones that immediately put him on alert. When she ended the call, her shoulders were rigid with tension. "Who was that?" he asked. Lauren turned, startled. "Just researching hotels, extended stay places that might be affordable." Nicholas felt something cold settle in his chest. "Why would you need a hotel?" "Because I can't stay here forever, Nicholas. I've been here almost a week. You've done more than enough, and I need to start figuring out my own situation. Your situation is that a man with cartel connections is looking for you. A hotel won't change that." "Cartel?" Lauren's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" Nicholas cursed internally. He'd meant to tell her about the investigation results, but the timing had never felt right. Now the information spilled out without careful framing. Ryan's company processes shipments for the Cartel del Golfo. He has access to resources and people far beyond what a normal civilian could mobilize. Lauren sank onto the sofa, phone slipping from her fingers. Oh God. I knew his company was shady, but I didn't think, this is why you can't just move to a hotel and hope for the best. They have networks, informants, ways of finding people that don't show up on security cameras. Then what am I supposed to do? Her voice rose, frustration breaking through. Just hide in your apartment forever? Let you control every aspect of my life because it's safer that way? I've already done that with one man, Nicholas. I can't do it again. The comparison hit like a physical blow. Nicholas crossed the room and sat across from her, forcing himself to stay calm. I'm not him. I know that. But you're still making all my decisions. Where I can go, who I can talk to, what level of danger I'm allowed to understand. Lauren's hands twisted together. I appreciate everything you've done. I do, but I need to participate in my own life. even if that means taking risks you don't approve of. Nicholas leaned forward, forearms on his knees. This isn't about approval. It's about keeping you alive. Is it? Or is it about you needing to be in control of every variable? The accuracy of the observation made him pause. He'd been asking himself the same question for days, unable to separate genuine protection from the compulsion to manage every aspect of his environment. Both, he admitted. I won't pretend otherwise, but that doesn't change the fact that leaving here puts you in danger, and staying here puts you in danger. Your sister. Everyone connected to you. Lauren stood and paced to the window. Maybe the hotel is the best option. Put distance between us before Ryan figures out I'm here. He won't figure it out. You can't guarantee that. No, but I can make sure that if he does, he regrets it. Nicholas stood as well, closing the distance between them. You want honesty? Fine. This stopped being about obligation 3 days ago. Your presence here has become, he struggled for words that wouldn't reveal too much, important. To me. And I don't say that lightly. Lauren turned to face him, blue eyes wide with surprise. Nicholas, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just explaining why I can't let you walk into a situation I can't control. Not because you're an obligation, but because the thought of something happening to you when I could have prevented it. He cut himself off, already having said too much. The confession hung between them, raw and unprotected. Lauren's expression softened, walls coming down to reveal the same complicated feelings he'd been fighting. I feel safe with you, she said quietly. For the first time in years, I'm not constantly afraid. That terrifies me almost as much as Ryan does. Because I don't know what happens when this is over, when I'm no longer in danger, and there's no reason for me to be here. Nicholas reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly familiar after 2 nights ago. Then we'll figure that out when the time comes. That's not a plan. No, but it's honest. Lauren leaned into his touch, just slightly, and Nicholas felt the moment stretch taut with possibility. He was about to say something more, something that would cross the careful lines he'd drawn, when his phone exploded with noise. Marco's name flashed on the screen. Nicholas answered immediately. Years of training pushing personal feelings aside. Talk to me. Boss, we have a problem. Foster was just spotted at SUNY Brooklyn. He approached the sisters' dorm building 20 minutes ago. Campus security turned him away, but he's circling the area. Looks like he's planning another approach. Ice flooded Nicholas's veins. Where is she now? Still in her dorm. We have eyes on all exits. He won't get near her, but he knows where she is now. Nicholas processed the information with mechanical efficiency. Maintain position. I'm sending additional support. And Marco? If he tries to enter that building, you have my permission to intervene directly. He ended the call and found Lauren staring at him with growing panic. What happened? Is it Melissa? Ryan was at her campus. He was turned away, but he knows where she lives now. Nicholas was already moving, pulling up contacts on his phone. He's escalating. I need to call her. Right now. She needs to know. Use the secure phone. Nicholas handed her the device he'd given her days ago. Tell her what's happening. Tell her there are people watching out for her, but she needs to be careful. Lauren's hands shook as she dialed. Nicholas could hear the phone ring once, twice, 3 times before a young voice answered. Lauren? Oh my God, I've been so worried. You haven't answered any of my texts. Melissa, listen to me. Lauren's voice cracked. I need you to stay calm. But there's something you need to know. Nicholas moved to his office and began making calls, mobilizing resources, creating layers of protection around a young woman he'd never met, but who mattered because she mattered to Lauren. Within 10 minutes, he doubled the surveillance team, alerted campus security through back channels, and arranged for an unmarked car to be available if Melissa needed immediate extraction. When he returned to the living room, Lauren was still on the phone, but her face had shifted from panic to confusion. What do you mean you've noticed them? Lauren asked. What men? Nicholas could hear Melissa's response through the speaker. There's been this guy in a black jacket who's always across from my building, and another one who sits in the library even though he never opens a book. They're not creepy or anything, just present, like security or something. Lauren's eyes found Nicholas's. Understanding dawned slowly, followed by something that looked like wonder mixed with exasperation. "They're there to protect you," Lauren said. "They work for someone I trust." "Protect me from what?" "From Ryan. He's been looking for me, and I was worried he might try to use you to find me." Melissa's voice hardened with anger. "That bastard. I knew something was wrong when you disappeared. Are you safe?" "Where are you?" "I'm safe. I can't tell you where, but I'm safe. And now you know about the security. If you see Ryan, if he tries to approach you, you call the police immediately, and then you call this number." Lauren rattled off Nicholas's private line from memory. "Someone will come get you within minutes." They talked for another 10 minutes, Lauren reassuring her sister while Melissa asked questions that Lauren couldn't fully answer. When the call finally ended, Lauren sat motionless, phone clutched in both hands. "You've been protecting her this whole time," she said. "Since the first night I was here." "Yes. And you didn't tell me because you thought I'd worry." "Yes." Lauren stood and moved toward him, each step deliberate. When she reached him, she didn't stop until they were inches apart. "Thank you," she said simply. "For keeping her safe, for letting me call her, for all of it." Nicholas resisted the urge to pull her closer. Ryan being at her campus changes things. He's getting desperate. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done days ago. Have a conversation with him that makes our positions very clear." "Nicholas, this isn't negotiable, Lauren. He threatened your sister. That crosses a line he doesn't get to walk back from." He moved past her to his bedroom, changing into clothes that wouldn't show blood if the conversation became physical. When he emerged, Lauren blocked his path to the door. "You're going to hurt him. I'm going to make sure he understands that certain actions have consequences. Don't do something you'll regret because of me." Nicholas placed both hands on her shoulders, holding her gaze with intensity that left no room for misunderstanding. "I won't regret protecting you, or your sister, or making sure Ryan Foster never looks in your direction again." He released her and moved toward the elevator. "Stay here. Lock the door. I'll be back in a few hours." "Nicholas, wait!" But the elevator doors were already closing. The drive to Ryan Foster's office building took 20 minutes. Nicholas sat in the back of the SUV with Marco and another associate, reviewing the layout, planning approach angles, calculating variables. It was familiar work. The kind of strategic thinking that had kept him alive through 2 decades of navigating dangerous territories. They waited in the parking garage until Foster emerged from the building, alone and overconfident. Nicholas approached from behind, Marco flanking left while the other man moved right. By the time Foster realized he wasn't alone, escape was impossible. "Ryan Foster," Nicholas said pleasantly. "We need to talk." Foster turned, recognition flashing immediately to defensive aggression. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone with information about Lauren Mitchell." "I understand you've been looking for her." Foster's eyes lit with predatory interest. "You know where she is?" "I do, which is why I'm here to deliver a message." Nicholas stepped closer, invading personal space with deliberate intimidation. "Stop looking. Stop asking questions. Stop going near anyone connected to her. Pretend she never existed. She stole money from me. I'm pressing charges." "No, you're not. Because the report you filed is fabricated, and I have documentation proving it." "You're going to withdraw that report. You're going to tell your private investigator that you're no longer interested in finding her, and you're going to stay far away from her sister." Foster's jaw clenched. "You can't tell me what to do. Do you have any idea who I work for?" "Meridian Import Solutions, which processes containers for the Cartel del Golfo." "Yes, Ryan. I know exactly who you work for." Nicholas's voice dropped to something cold and final. "The question is, do you know who I am?" He watched understanding filter across Foster's face. The man had connections in the criminal world. He recognized power when he confronted it directly. "Lauren is under my protection now," Nicholas continued, "which means she's untouchable. If you approach her, her sister, or anyone else connected to her, you won't have to worry about legal consequences. You'll have to worry about me. And trust me when I say that legal consequences would be preferable." Foster tried to hold his ground, puffing up with false bravado. "You're threatening me? I'm explaining reality. What you do with that information is your choice. Nicholas turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ryan, if I find out you've retaliated in any way, if Lauren so much as receives a threatening text message, I will personally ensure that your employers learn about your very expensive gambling problem and your habit of skimming from shipment manifests. I assume they'll be understanding about that. The color drained from Foster's face. Marco stepped forward, shoulders square and intimidating. My associate will escort you back to your car. I suggest you think very carefully about your next moves. Nicholas returned to the SUV and waited while Marco had his own quiet conversation with Foster. Through the tinted windows, he watched the man deflate, recognize he'd miscalculated badly. When Foster finally drove away, hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled force, Nicholas felt a grim satisfaction. The confrontation had been necessary, but it had also been personal in a way that concerned him. He'd been willing to do worse, to cross lines that shouldn't be crossed, all for a woman he'd known less than a week. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. Marco knew better than to comment on what had happened. When they arrived at the building, Nicholas dismissed him and rode the elevator alone, watching his reflection in the polished doors. Bruised knuckles stared back at him. He'd hit Foster once, just once, when the man had made a comment about Lauren that crossed from insult into territory that required physical response. The contact had been brief but satisfying. Lauren was waiting when he stepped into the apartment. She took one look at his hand and moved immediately to the kitchen, pulling out first aid supplies without asking. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to a bar stool. Nicholas sat. He was suddenly, inexplicably tired. The adrenaline of confrontation had burned off, leaving only the weight of what he'd done and what it meant. Lauren filled a bowl with warm water and retrieved clean cloths. She worked in silence, cleaning the split skin across his knuckles with gentle precision. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her touch remained steady. "Did you kill him?" she asked quietly. "No, but you hurt him. I made sure he understood consequences. That required a level of physical emphasis." Nicholas watched her face, trying to read her reaction. "Does that frighten you?" "It should." Lauren rinsed the cloth and continued cleaning. "But it doesn't. Is that wrong?" "I don't know." She looked up, blue eyes meeting his. "What did you say to him?" "That you're under my protection. That approaching you or Melissa would be a mistake he'd regret. That his connections don't frighten me because mine run deeper." "And he believed you?" "He did by the time I finished explaining." Lauren set aside the cloth and reached for antibiotic ointment, applying it with careful attention to each scrape and cut. Nicholas watched her work, aware of every point where her fingers touched his skin. The intimacy of the moment exceeded anything explicitly romantic. A different kind of vulnerability emerging from violence, transformed into care. "Your hands are shaking," Nicholas observed. "I know." Lauren's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm processing. Give me a minute." He gave her the time, watching emotions flicker across her face. Fear, relief, anger, gratitude, something else that made his chest tighten painfully. When she finally finished bandaging his hand, she didn't release it. Instead, her fingers traced the edge of the bandage, following the line where protection met damage. Nicholas caught her wrist gently, feeling her pulse flutter beneath his fingers. Fast, erratic, mirroring his own heartbeat. "Lauren," he said, not sure what came after her name, but needing to say it anyway. She looked up, and the distance between them suddenly felt insurmountable and non-existent at once. Nicholas leaned forward, drawn by gravity he couldn't fight anymore. Lauren's breath caught, lips parting in anticipation. They were inches apart when she pulled back abruptly, breaking contact. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet. This is too much, too fast, and I don't trust my own judgment right now." Rejection stung, but Nicholas understood. She was right to be cautious. Nothing about this situation was normal or healthy. They'd been thrown together by crisis, forced into proximity that manufactured intimacy without foundation. "I understand," he said, releasing her wrist. Lauren stood and carried the first aid supplies back to their cabinet, movements jerky with suppressed emotion. When she turned back, tears tracked down her face. "It's not that I don't feel it," she said. "Whatever this is between us, I just need time to figure out if it's real or if it's just safety and gratitude and trauma bonding. Take all the time you need. Even if that means I should leave? Find somewhere else once Ryan isn't a threat anymore? The question cut deeper than Foster's face against his knuckles. Nicholas stood and moved to the window, putting physical distance between them. If that's what you need, yes. I won't keep you here against your will. That's not an answer about what you want. Nicholas turned to face her. What I want stopped being relevant the moment I found you in my bathroom. This is about what you need. What keeps you safe? What lets you heal? Lauren wiped her eyes, smudging tears across her cheeks. You're impossible. So I've been told. She left the room without another word, retreating to the guest bedroom and closing the door with careful softness. Nicholas remained by the window, watching the city lights blur into patterns that meant nothing. His hand throbbed dully beneath the bandages. Small price for eliminating a threat. But the larger danger, the one he couldn't punch or threaten or control, had already infiltrated his defenses. Lauren Mitchell had become the kind of complication that couldn't be solved with strategy or force. And Nicholas, for all his power and resources, had no idea how to protect himself from that. Nicholas woke before his alarm the next morning, the unfamiliar sensation of warmth against his side, anchoring him to the present, instead of dragging him back into old nightmares. For a moment he lay still, eyes closed, cataloging details the way he always did. Soft breathing, the faint citrus scent of Lauren's shampoo on his pillow, a weight tucked into his right side, knee resting lightly over his leg, her hand splayed against his chest as if to reassure herself he was still there. He opened his eyes. Lauren slept deeply, face relaxed in a way he'd rarely seen when she was awake. The tightness in her jaw was gone. The little line between her brows, carved by months of constant vigilance, had smoothed. In the pale morning light, she looked younger than 27, and older than that all at once, like someone who'd lived several lifetimes compressed into a few brutal years. Nicholas knew he should move, detach, put space back where space belonged, but the idea of pulling away when she finally looked peaceful felt like another kind of cruelty. He let himself have one selfish minute. Just one. He memorized the way she fit against him, the way her fingers twitched slightly when he shifted his hand along the curve of her spine, the way her lips parted on a quiet exhale that stirred the fabric of his shirt. Then he gently untangled himself. Lauren murmured, but didn't wake as he slid from the bed. He stood for a moment, watching her roll to the warm spot he'd left, face burrowing into the pillow. The sight did something strange to his chest, an ache that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with a vulnerability he usually kept locked down. He pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt and left the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. The routine helped. Coffee, emails, a brief call with his attorney to confirm that the paperwork from yesterday's meeting had been filed and accepted. The protective order was now official. The fabricated theft report expunged. On paper, at least, Ryan Foster had been pushed out of Lauren's life. The rest would take longer. By the time Lauren padded into the kitchen, barefoot and sleepy-eyed in one of his t-shirts and a pair of leggings Gabriella had retrieved from her old apartment, Nicholas had almost convinced himself he was back in control. Almost. "Morning," she said, voice rough with sleep. His gaze dropped automatically, taking in the shirt that hung a little too big on her frame, the way she tugged at the hem, as if suddenly aware of how it might look. The sight of her in his clothes hit him with more force than it should have, a quiet stake driven into ground he'd never meant to claim. "Morning," he replied, forcing his tone to remain even. "Coffee's ready." She crossed to the counter and poured herself a mug, fingers wrapping around it like she was anchoring herself to something solid. For a few minutes they moved around each other in the kitchen in a kind of domestic choreography that felt dangerously normal. Lauren took a sip and winced. "Still too strong." "It's not strong," Nicholas said. "You're just used to coffee-flavored milk." "You're a coffee snob," she countered. "Admit it. Efficient caffeine delivery system. That's all it is." She smiled into her mug, and the simple expression punched through the armor he tried to put back on every morning. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, but weighted. Memories from the day before hung in the air. The meeting, her words to Ryan, The way she'd kissed him when they got home, like she'd made a decision and was finally willing to own it. Lauren set her mug down carefully. So, he echoed. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about yesterday. She gestured vaguely between them. About what this is. You were very clear, Nicholas said, leaning on the island. You're choosing it, with conditions. Your pace, your calls. I meant that, she said, but I also know what your life looks like. I heard pieces of that meeting you had last night from your office. Something about shipments and territories and people who don't exactly solve disagreements with mediation. Nicholas held her gaze. He'd purposely left the office door slightly ajar, not by accident. If she was going to choose him, she needed to understand what that choice meant. You're not naive, he said gently. You've always known my business isn't clean. Knowing in theory and hearing real conversations are different things. Lauren lifted her mug again, fingers tapping against the ceramic. Yesterday I told Ryan I was choosing who stands next to me now. I meant that too. But if I stand next to you, I'm standing next to all of it. Yes. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. Me knowing? Really knowing? Because once I see it, I can't unsee it, and I won't pretend. He thought about lying, about offering some softened version of the truth that would make this easier. But he'd built a life on reading lies in other people. He refused to become someone she had to analyze like that. I'd rather you know exactly who I am than love some edited version of me that doesn't exist, he said. If you decide you can't accept it, I'll deal with that. But I won't build this on illusions. This, she repeated, rolling the word around like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. Okay. Then I need you to promise me something. That depends on the promise. If you ever ask me to look away from something I can't live with, I'll leave. Her voice was steady now. I don't mean disagreements about your work or your choices. I mean lines I can't cross. And I need you to accept that I have them. Nicholas studied her. There were the usual lines. No violence against children, no trafficking, no senseless cruelty. Lines he'd already drawn for his organization years ago. Non-negotiable boundaries that made his operation marginally less monstrous than others in the same world. I won't ask you to be okay with everything I do, he said. But there will be things I can't tell you, not because I don't trust you, but because knowing would put you in more danger. I can live with that, she said after a moment, as long as secrecy is about safety, not control. Fair distinction. Her shoulders eased slightly. Some of the tension that had crept in during the conversation melted away, replaced by something more fragile. Good, she said. Because my sister basically told me last night that if I broke it off with you because of your job after everything you've done, she'd kick my ass. That dragged a short laugh out of him. Melissa said that? Not in those exact words, but close. Lauren tilted her head. She likes you. She doesn't know me. She knows enough. That you protected her before you even met her. That you let me decide whether to face Ryan. That you didn't blow up and make the hearing about posturing or power. She pays attention. So do you, he said. Occupational hazard. Teachers notice everything. Lauren stepped back from the island and stretched, wincing as muscles pulled tight. Speaking of occupational hazards, your sister texted about coming over. Today? In about an hour. She held up her phone. She apparently needs to see with her own eyes that I'm not just Stockholm syndroming my way through some Mafia version of a gilded cage. Nicholas exhaled. Of course she does. He spent the next hour catching up on messages while Lauren disappeared into the guest room to change. When the doorbell finally chimed, he checked the camera out of habit. Gabriella stood in the hallway, wearing black jeans, ankle boots, and a rust-colored blouse that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fashion shoot rather than a midtown subway station. Her expression, however, was anything but polished. Determined was the word that came to mind. Nicholas opened the door before she could knock a second time. You look tired, she said by way of greeting. You look like trouble. Flattery will get you nowhere. She shouldered past him and called down the hallway. Lauren, I brought overpriced pastries and opinions. Lauren emerged a moment later, hair pulled into a low ponytail, wearing dark jeans and a soft beige sweater that somehow made her eyes look even bluer. She smiled when she saw Gabriella, a real smile that reached her eyes. You made it, Lauren said, stepping into an easy hug. Obviously. Gabriella pulled back and held her at arm's length. "Let me look at you." Lauren submitted to the inspection without protest. After a second, Gabriella nodded, satisfied. "Color in your cheeks, no haunted raccoon eyes, wearing clothes that fit. My brother hasn't locked you in a dungeon yet. So far, so good." "There is no dungeon," Nicholas said dryly from behind them. "There might as well be," Gabriella shot back. "This entire building is a fortress." Nicholas let the jab slide. It wasn't untrue. They gathered in the living room. Gabriella dropped a paper bag of pastries on the coffee table and kicked off her boots like she owned the place, curling up sideways on one end of the sofa. Lauren took the other end, tucking her legs under herself. Nicholas sat in the armchair opposite, automatically positioning himself so he could see both women and the front door without turning his head. Gabriella's gaze flicked between them, sharp and assessing. "So," she said, breaking off a piece of croissant, "are we going to pretend something hasn't shifted in here? Or are we all going to be adults and talk about it?" "Subtle," Nicholas muttered. Lauren flushed faintly. "We're figuring things out." "That's vague and unsatisfying," Gabriella said, "but I'll allow it for now." She turned to Nicholas. "Have you explained everything?" "I explained enough. Define enough. She knows what I do. The contours, if not the details." Gabriella narrowed her eyes. "And you understand what comes with him, right?" she asked Lauren. "Privacy will be a myth. People will make assumptions. There will be nights when he doesn't come home, and he won't be able to tell you where he was or what he was doing beyond handling things. Are you prepared for that?" Lauren met her gaze without flinching. "I'm prepared to make my own choices. That includes accepting there are parts of his life I won't have access to. I'd be lying if I said it didn't scare me, but it scares me less than the idea of going back to a life where every decision about my day was made for me." Gabriella looked at her brother. "You hear that? That's trust. Don't screw it up." "I'm aware of the stakes," Nicholas said. "You think you are," she replied. "But you have a habit of deciding what's best for everyone, and then acting like it's generosity instead of control." He absorbed the hit without reacting. Lauren watched them both, eyes moving between siblings like she was following a tennis match. "I told him," Lauren said to Gabriella, "if he ever asks me to ignore something I can't live with, I'll leave." "And he agreed?" "He didn't fight me on it," Lauren said, "which is a start." Gabriella leaned back against the cushions, studying Nicholas with the familiarity of someone who'd watched him build his empire brick by uncompromising brick. "You deserve to be happy, Nico," she said finally. "I've been saying that for years, but not at the cost of turning someone else into collateral damage. Even if that someone is willing." Lauren interjected softly. "I'm not collateral." "No," Gabriella agreed. "You're the first person he's let this close without an agenda attached. That's why I'm here, to make sure he understands what that means." Nicholas felt the conversation pressing against lines he wasn't ready to cross in front of Lauren. Not yet. He shifted to practical ground. "Speaking of agendas," he said, "there's something you both need to know. Foster appears to have taken the hint. He's bought a one-way ticket out of the country. My contacts say he's planning to set up in Mexico for a while, closer to the people he shouldn't have been playing games with from this side of the border." Lauren exhaled. "So he's actually leaving?" "It looks that way," Nicholas said. "He's withdrawn his complaint officially. The protective order stands here, but jurisdiction gets messy once he crosses a border. The good news is, men like him don't fare well when they're no longer the ones holding all the power in a room. He'll have his hands full staying useful and alive. Hunting you will drop on his priority list. Will he ever come back?" Melissa's voice wasn't here, but Lauren's question carried her sister's fear too. "Possibly. But by then, a lot of other things will be in place. Documentation. Witness statements. The file my attorney is building doesn't disappear just because he changes his address." Lauren nodded slowly. "I don't feel as light as I thought I would hearing that." "That's normal," Gabriella said. "It doesn't all evaporate because he got on a plane. Trauma doesn't check calendars." "I know." Lauren gave a small, humorless smile. "But I'm trying to let it feel like at least the door is closed. Maybe not locked, but closed." Nicholas watched her. The way she spoke about doors now. Open, closed, locked. Language of boundaries. language he understood too well. After Gabriella left in the afternoon with a final, lingering hug for Lauren and a pointed, wordless look for Nicholas that conveyed volumes, the apartment felt quieter, but not empty. Different from the early days when Lauren had tried to take up as little space as possible. Now, her presence filled rooms even when she wasn't in them. Nicholas found her an hour later in his office doorway, leaning against the frame. "Can I come in?" she asked. "You don't need permission." "I think we both know that's not entirely true," she said, lips quirking. "This room feels different, like your brain externalized." He glanced around at the carefully organized chaos. Screens, files in neat stacks, maps on one wall with pins and strings marking routes, territories, operations. She wasn't wrong. "Fair assessment," he said. She stepped inside, studying the maps first. "Is that all?" "Business," he confirmed. "Supply lines, distribution channels. Some things you don't want detailed explanations for." "Probably not," she agreed. Then, after a pause, "Show me what you can." He considered the request. Trust was a double-edged blade in his line of work, but she'd already been drawn in whether he liked it or not. Keeping her ignorant wouldn't keep her safe. It would just make her easier to blindside. Nicholas pulled one of the pins from a port city on the map and traced a line inland. "This is a route we stopped using 2 years ago when a rival family decided they wanted a cut. We don't operate there now. Too volatile." "By operate, you mean?" "Move things," he said. "Sometimes legitimate goods, sometimes not." "Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. "About the not things?" "I feel responsible," he said, "for doing it better than the people who would fill the vacuum if we disappeared." "Better," she repeated. "Safer? Less indiscriminate," he said. "You won't believe me if I say we have rules, but we do. Lines we don't cross, people we don't touch. Women like me?" she asked quietly. "Women like you," he said. "Children. People who didn't consent to being in the game." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I can't say that makes it easy to swallow, but it makes it less impossible." He let that sit. Then he changed the subject. "Your sister called earlier," he said. Lauren's head snapped up. "Is she okay?" "Fine. She wanted to confirm she can still visit next weekend. Something about a real dinner that doesn't come in takeout containers." Lauren relaxed a fraction. "She's been on this kick since nursing school started about learning to cook actual meals that aren't microwavable. She threatened to stage an intervention if I tried to live on cereal and toast again." Nicholas allowed himself a small smile. "She's welcome here, with some ground rules." "Which are?" "No social media posts from inside the apartment. No tagging locations when she's with you. No photos with identifiable features of the building in the background. So, basically, be normal, but less online." "Exactly." Lauren walked around the desk and stopped next to his chair, resting her hip against the edge. "Can I ask you something else?" she said. "You're going to anyway. Earlier, Gabriella said you have a habit of deciding what's best for everyone and calling it protection." She met his eyes. "Is that what this is with me?" "Partly," he said, appreciating the honesty of her hit. "I won't pretend I don't think I know better than most people when it comes to danger. I've spent my life reading threats. But I'm trying." He paused on the word, unfamiliar on his tongue. "To leave room for what you want. Not just what I think you need." "That's new for you," she said, not a question. Painfully. She smiled, but it faded quickly into something more serious. "I meant what I said in front of Ryan," she told him. "About choosing who stands next to me. That means choosing this messy version of you, with all the contradiction and danger and control issues. It also means I have to choose myself, over and over, not just you." "Good," he said, "because I have no interest in being with someone who disappears into my shadow again." "That's not partnership, that's ownership." She studied him for a long beat. "I think you're more of a romantic than you want to admit." "Blasphemy," he replied. "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." She laughed, leaning down to brush a quick, soft kiss against his mouth. It wasn't heated like the one in front of the window the day before. This one felt different. Settled. Assured. "When do I get to see what you're like in your natural habitat?" she asked when she straightened. "Not here. Out there. With your people." "You have," he said. "Yesterday in the conference room. With attorneys and cops and an abusive ex watching. You weren't fully yourself there," she countered. "You were contained. Edited. I saw flashes of it when you talked to Ryan, but most of it was under the surface. You want to see me in a room full of criminals?" he clarified. "I want to see if the version of you I'm falling for exists there too," she said simply. The words hit him with more force than any punch he'd taken. He had to look away for a moment, collecting himself. "There's a meeting tonight," he admitted eventually. "Not here. At one of the restaurants. Front of house business. No guns on tables, no overt threats. Just conversations with men who could kill me if they thought it was worth the risk. Sounds relaxing," she said. "It's not where I'd normally bring someone He stopped, the word hovering just out of reach. "Someone I care about. But if you're serious about seeing my world, this is the least dangerous way to do it." She considered this. "Will they know who I am?" "They'll know you're with me," he said. "That will be enough. Is that safe for me?" "Safer than the alternative," he said. "In my world, if you try to hide someone important, it invites curiosity. If you show them openly, with the right posture, it sends a message. This person is under my protection. Off limits." "Then I want to go," she said. "You don't have to prove anything. This isn't about proving something to you," she said. "It's about proving something to myself. That I'm not still that woman who flinches at raised voices and hides in bathrooms. I want to walk into a room of dangerous men and not feel like prey." Nicholas nodded slowly. He recognized that hunger, the need to reclaim power in spaces that used to represent nothing but fear. "All right," he said, "but we do it my way." "Which is?" "You stay close to me at all times," he said. "You don't wander off. You don't talk to anyone alone. You let me read the room and direct you without arguing. Understood?" "Understood," she said. "What should I wear?" The question shouldn't have thrown him. But imagining Lauren in his world, at his restaurant, sitting at his table where people who owed him money and favors would see her, it stirred something proprietary deep inside him. "Something you feel strong in," he said. "Comfortable enough to move in, formal enough to convey that you belong at that table." "Wow," she said. "Mystic Mafia fashion advice. So helpful. I'll have Gabriella send over some options," he offered. "She enjoys that kind of thing." Lauren smiled. "Of course she does." Hours later, when they were getting ready to leave, Nicholas stood in the hallway outside the bedroom, momentarily speechless. Lauren stepped out in a dress he'd never seen before, soft champagne fabric that skimmed her figure without clinging, sleeves to the elbow, neckline modest but elegant. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, makeup understated but highlighting the blue of her eyes. "You're staring," she said. He searched for the right word and settled on the only honest one. "Beautiful." Color rose in her cheeks. "Good enough to be seen with you in your natural habitat?" "More than." He offered his arm. She took it. As they rode the private elevator down to the garage, Lauren glanced up at him. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, "whatever I see or feel, I want you to know something." "What's that?" "When I told Ryan I'd chosen who stands next to me now, I wasn't bluffing." Her fingers tightened briefly on his arm. "I meant you." Nicholas met her gaze, and for the first time since he'd taken over his father's empire at 15, allowed himself to fully accept what that meant. He wasn't walking into that restaurant alone anymore. Not really. And for a man who'd built an entire life on the belief that attachments were liabilities, the realization didn't feel like a weakness. It felt like a reason. Nicholas Bellini woke that evening with the unfamiliar sensation of not needing to be anywhere else. For years, nights had meant movement, meetings, calls, watching over shipments and alliances like spinning blades that would slice him open if he ever took his eyes off them. Tonight, the only thing demanding his attention was the woman in front of his closet, half turned toward the mirror, studying herself with an intensity he usually reserved for enemy dossiers. The dress was champagne, soft and fluid, catching the lamplight as she shifted. Lauren smoothed a hand over the fabric, then caught his reflection watching her in the mirror. "Too much?" she asked. "For who?" he replied. "For your restaurant," she said. "For being seen with you. I have no idea what the dress code is for Mafia boss takes you to dinner at one of his properties." "That," Nicholas said, pushing away from the doorframe, "is exactly right." He crossed the room, letting his gaze move over her with deliberate slowness. The dress skimmed her figure without clinging, sleeves brushing her elbows, neckline modest but elegant. She'd kept her hair down, waves resting over her shoulders, makeup subtle enough that most of what he saw was just her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Objectively," she said, trying for lightness. "Or in a, this is more dangerous than half my rivals kind of way." "Both." Color touched her cheeks. "Okay. But if I trip in these shoes, you're legally obligated to catch me." "That's not how the legal system works," he said. "But I'll allow it." She rolled her eyes and reached for a delicate necklace, hands fumbling slightly. Nicholas stepped in without asking, taking the chain from her fingers, moving behind her to fasten it at the nape of her neck. His fingers brushed warm skin. Lauren shivered almost imperceptibly. "Still okay?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes in the mirror. "I'm choosing this, remember?" He did remember. He remembered the way she'd said it a week ago, half terrified, half sure of herself for the first time in years. He remembered the hearing room, Ryan's smirk collapsing under the combined weight of evidence, and Lauren's quiet, "It's over." He also remembered the message that had landed that morning, a brief update from a man in Texas. Foster made it to Mexico, treading carefully, asking questions about you, but no moves this side of the border. The threat hadn't evaporated. It had just shifted geography. "Then let's go," Nicholas said. They took the back elevator down to the garage. Old habits. Lauren didn't argue this time. Instead, she looped her arm through his, gaze flicking around with the alertness of someone who'd learned the hard way what could happen when you stopped paying attention. The car ride downtown was quiet, but not tense. What used to be silence filled with things unsaid had become something else. A shared space where quiet didn't feel like absence. Lauren watched the city pass by, the canyon of buildings, the occasional flash of neon, the little dramas playing out at crosswalks. 3 weeks, she murmured. "I still can't believe it's only been 3 weeks." "Time bends under pressure," Nicholas said. "You sound like a physics professor," she said. "That sounds insulting." "It wasn't," she replied. "Just accurate." The restaurant sat on a corner in Tribeca, all warm light behind large windows, the name in understated letters above the entrance. To anyone else, it was just another successful Italian place catering to people who liked the illusion of discovery with their handmade pasta. To Nicholas, it was neutral ground dressed up as indulgence. Deals had been discussed at these tables. Lines had been drawn, alliances cemented. But on the surface, it was linen and crystal and good wine. They entered through the side door. Staff straightened when they saw him, posture shifting almost imperceptibly. A host approached, deference in every line. "Mr. Bellini," he said, "your table is ready." Lauren felt eyes on them as they followed the host through the dining room. People noticed Nicholas the way they noticed storms out at sea. Beautiful, dangerous, something you respected from a distance. She stayed close, not clinging, but aligned, matching his stride. At their table near the back, the city visible through a sheet of glass, Nicholas pulled out her chair. Small gesture. Not a performance, not an act. Just care, quiet and practiced. She sat, smoothing the dress beneath her, and exhaled in a slow, controlled breath. "You okay?" he asked. "So far," she said. "Ask me again after I get through a whole meal without someone being shot." "In this room," Nicholas said, opening his menu purely out of habit. "The most violent thing that happens is arguments over wine pairings." The waiter came. Nicholas ordered without looking, knowing the menu the way he knew shipping routes and weak spots in his enemy's security. Lauren listened, amused. I see the control issues extend to food ordering, she said when they were alone again. You can send it back, he said. I won't be offended. I'm too hungry to be picky. She leaned back slightly, eyes roaming the room. Everyone looks so normal. They all have problems, he said. They're just wearing better shoes to have them in. She smiled and turned back to him. You know, part of me thought I'd be more nervous. First time being out with you like this. Knowing what you really do when you put the nice suit away. And I feel strange saying this, but I don't feel like prey, she said, for the first time in a long time. You're not, Nicholas replied. Not anymore. Not because nothing can hurt me, she clarified, but because if it tries, I know I can run toward something, not just away. He let that sink in. When she'd arrived, she'd had nothing but flight in her vocabulary. Now, fight had found its place again, not the kind that matched physical strength, but the quieter kind that chose to stand and speak and stay. Dinner unfolded with an ease that would have felt impossible a month ago. They talked about trivial things. Lauren's disastrous attempt at baking the day before. I didn't know it was possible to burn the inside and undercook the outside at the same time. And Nicholas's grudging admission that, as a teenager, he'd briefly wanted to become an architect before life had yanked that possibility away. Let me guess, Lauren said. You liked the idea of designing structures no one could break into. I liked the idea of building something that didn't require breaking anyone, he said. Do you still? She asked. Sometimes, he admitted. Then the phone rings. She considered that. Maybe this is that for you. This? This, she gestured vaguely between them. Us. Not something you built on threats or necessity or family politics. Just choice. He studied her. It terrifies me more than some of the men I've dealt with. Good, she said. Means you're taking it seriously. A shadow fell across the table. Nicholas's attention snapped up, instincts primed for interruption. Instead, he saw a man in his 50s, well-tailored, expression respectful, hands visible. Mr. Bellini, the man said with a nod. Apologies for intruding. Make it brief, Nicholas replied. Just wanted to say thank you for the favor last year. The inspectors never came back. The man's gaze flicked to Lauren. Curiosity there, but no threat. Enjoy your evening. Pay your bills on time, Nicholas said. You won't need favors. The man smiled, dipped his head again, and retreated. Lauren watched him go. He looked like a dentist, she said. He is, Nicholas replied. She frowned, more bemused than confused. I thought your dealings were more with men in dark alleys than people who fix cavities. Crime is more banal than people think, he said. Everyone needs something. Everyone cuts corners somewhere. My job is making sure I know exactly where the corners are and who's cutting them. Sounds exhausting, she said. It is, he said. You make it less so. For once, Lauren didn't deflect. She just reached across the table and brushed the back of his bandaged hand with her fingers, a touch so light it might as well have been a promise. On the way out later, she didn't cling to his arm because she was afraid. She walked next to him because she chose to, head high, eyes steady. In the car, she kicked off her heels and groaned in relief. Your world needs more comfortable shoes, she said. My world doesn't notice shoes, he replied. Just posture. Well, my posture is protesting. He glanced at her bare feet, toes painted a soft chipped pink. Duly noted. They rode the elevator back up in companionable silence. When the doors opened into the penthouse, Lauren stepped out first, dress catching the light, hair slightly tousled from the wind outside. She stopped halfway into the living room. Something's different, she said. Nicholas followed her gaze. The space that had always felt precise and controlled now contained a new energy. It took her a moment to realize what had changed. The room at the far end of the hallway, once a glorified storage space, glowed with warm light spilling through a half-open door. You did it, she said. I said I would, he replied. She walked toward the room slowly, almost cautiously, like approaching something fragile. When she pushed the door open, the breath left her chest. Where there had once stood a treadmill and stacked boxes, now stood an artist's studio. A large easel dominated the center, Canvas blank but waiting. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with paints arranged by color, brushes in jars, palettes, charcoal sticks, sketchbooks. A sturdy table hugged another wall, its surface protected by plastic, jars for water, rags folded neatly at one end. The overhead lighting had been changed, softened, angled to avoid harsh glare. A wide armchair sat in one corner with a throw over it, like someone had thought about not just working here, but staying. Lauren stepped inside as if afraid it might vanish if she moved too quickly. Her fingers brushed over the spine of a sketchbook, the smooth wood of the easel, the cool metal of a paint tube. "Nicholas," she whispered. "What is this? You told me you needed space," he said from the doorway. "Not just to be safe. To be you. This room wasn't doing anything important. But this is..." She turned slowly, eyes wide, voice breaking on the edge of disbelief. "This is a studio. This is my studio." "Yes," he said. "You did this while I was on the phone with Melissa. Then on the balcony," he said. "And earlier this week when you went with Gabriella to that art supply store. She's terrible at pretending she isn't planning something." Lauren let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I thought she was just dragging me through every aisle because she likes spending other people's money." "That too," he said. "But she gave me a list." I supplemented. She moved to the easel, resting her hand flat against the blank canvas. "You know what this feels like? An invasion of your minimalist aesthetic?" he suggested. "Like no one has ever believed in my art enough to make physical room for it," she said. Until now. He didn't try to fill that silence. He'd learned enough in 3 weeks to know when words helped and when they cheapened something. After a long moment, she turned, eyes shining. "You realize what you've done, right?" she said. "Bought too many paint colors?" he asked. "Apparently there are 97 shades of blue. You made it harder for me to ever leave," she said softly. The honesty hit them both at once. "I don't want leaving to feel easy," he said, "but I want it to remain possible." She studied him. Really studied him. In the doorway of the room he'd given to her dreams. "Do you know how rare that is?" she asked. "What?" "Someone powerful who can say, 'I want you here, and I'll survive if you walk away,' in the same breath," she said. "Ryan would have burned my paintings if he thought they represented a life that didn't revolve around him." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "He'll never touch anything of yours again." "I know," she said, "because you already made sure of that." She crossed the room to him, stopping close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her blue eyes. "I need you to hear me," she said. "Really hear me. I'm listening. I can't promise this will always be easy," she said. "There will be days when your work scares me. When news headlines make me wonder what you aren't saying. When my old patterns try to drag me back into apology and gratitude for every kindness." She took his hand, laying it flat over her heart. "But I can promise this," she continued. "Every day I'm here, it's because I chose it. Not because I'm trapped. Not because I'm afraid of the alternative. Because this..." She gestured between them with her free hand. "Feels like my life. Mine." Even with all its danger and complexity, her heartbeat pressed steady against his palm, stronger than the first time he'd felt it, when she'd clutched his shirt in a nightmare. "And when you're not here?" he asked quietly. "I'll call," she said, "or text, or yell through the walls. Whatever level of melodrama the situation requires." He huffed out a short laugh, then sobered as she went on. "I want your world," she said. "Not all of it. Not the parts that would break me. But enough to know who I'm lying next to. Enough to not flinch when someone says your name in a way most people would find terrifying. And what do you want me to have of yours?" he asked. "All of it," she said. "The good, the broken. The mornings where I'm too tired to speak, and the nights when I can't stop painting. The days when I'm brave, and the days when I'm not. You think I can handle that?" "I think you've already started," she said. He exhaled, thumb brushing the beat of her pulse. "Then I have something to ask." "Okay. Will you stay?" he asked. "Not just for now. Not just until you're better, whatever that means. Will you live here? Not as a guest. Not as a problem I'm solving. As... mine." The word hung between them, dangerous and tender at once. Lauren didn't look away. Yours, she repeated. And my own. And yours, he agreed. Then yes, she said. I'll stay. She said it like a vow. Not dramatic, not loud, just certain. Relief hit him in a wave he hadn't been prepared for. It didn't erase the caution in his bones, the decades of training that told him anything gained could be lost with one wrong move. But it eased something tight that had been wrapped around his ribs for weeks. Good, he said, voice rougher than he liked, because Melissa already claimed the guest room, and I'm not sleeping on the couch. Lauren laughed, the sound spilling into the studio and filling it with a kind of light paint couldn't catch. Speaking of Melissa, she arrived the following weekend exactly on time, hauling a duffel bag and a grocery sack like she was preparing to invade. Okay, she announced as soon as Nicholas opened the door. House rules. 1. If you two start making out in front of me, I'm leaving. 2. If you cook, I'm supervising. 3. If I fall asleep on your couch, you're both too boring and it's not my fault. You come into my home and issue rules? Nicholas asked. Somebody has to, she said, breezing inside. Hi, Lauren. Lauren hugged her, expression softer than Nicholas had ever seen in any of his mirrors. Dinner was chaos. Melissa overseasoned the salad. Nicholas burned the first batch of garlic bread because he was distracted by watching Lauren laugh. Lauren dropped a spoon and somehow splattered tomato sauce onto the floor and her own elbow. No one was keeping track of whose fault anything was. No one was timing how long Lauren stayed seated. No one raised their voice in that particular way that signaled an explosion was coming. Melissa filled the gaps in conversation with stories from nursing rotations. Lauren chimed in with anecdotes from her years teaching. Kids who'd mistaken Monet for a brand of candy or used entire tubes of paint on one corner of paper. Nicholas listened more than he spoke and found that he didn't mind. Later, when Melissa was sprawled on the armchair under a throw blanket, halfway through a movie and already snoring softly, Lauren tilted her head toward her sister. She never got to see me like this before, she said quietly. Every time we were together the last 2 years, I was jumpy and defensive and apologizing for things that weren't my fault. She sees you now, Nicholas said. Really sees you. Do you? Lauren asked. Every inconvenient angle, he said. She nudged his shoulder. Good. When Melissa finally retired to the guest room, if you two are going to have one of those weird, intense talks again, I'd like to be unconscious for it. The apartment settled into a softer quiet. Lauren wandered back into the studio, drawn to the canvas the way some people were drawn to windows. Nicholas followed, leaning in the doorway. She picked up a brush and examined the painting in progress. The cityscape had evolved since he'd first seen it. Light had crept farther across the buildings, soft morning tones giving way to something brighter at the edges. It's changing, he said. So am I, she replied. Where is that again? He asked, nodding toward the skyline. A bridge between my old life and this one, she said. Metaphorically speaking. You always this literal with your metaphors? He asked. Always this annoying with your questions? She countered. He stepped inside, closing the distance between them to stand at her shoulder. For a moment, they both just looked. At the painting, at the layers beneath the surface, at the brush strokes that hid mistakes under intentional color. You know, Lauren said quietly, for a long time when I pictured my future, it was blank. Or worse, it looked like a slightly grayer version of my present. Same fights, same fear, just more wrinkles. And now? He asked. Now I see something, she said. It doesn't have clean edges yet. It's not all in focus. But I see mornings where I'm rushing because I've got a class to get to and paint on my face and you're stealing my coffee even though you could buy your own cafe. Your coffee tastes better, he said. You say that now because it's free, she replied. I see nights where Melissa crashes on our couch because she's between shifts and can't face the subway. I see fights with you that actually lead somewhere instead of circling the same drain over and over. I see myself arguing back without being afraid it'll cost me my safety. She set the brush down, paint glistening on the bristles, and turned to face him fully. And I see you, she finished. Not as a savior, not as a captor, as the man I chose to walk beside. Even when the path isn't straight, he let the words wash over him. They didn't erase the realities outside these walls. The cartel still existed. Rivals still watched. Somewhere across a border, a man named Ryan Foster was learning how small he really was in a hierarchy that didn't care about his bruised ego. But here, in this room, something else existed that he'd never factored into risk assessments and contingency plans. "Lauren," he said quietly, "I've spent most of my life believing attachment was just another word for leverage." "It can be," she said, "if you use it that way." "I don't want to," he said. "Not with you." "Then don't," she replied. "Start there." He reached for her, hands settling on her waist, and pulled her closer. When their lips met, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't a reflex against fear. It was deliberate, steady, a continuation instead of a beginning. When they broke apart, foreheads touching, breath mingling, Lauren whispered, "You know what I told myself the night I left? When I was halfway down that fire escape thinking I might fall and break my neck? That you should have worn better shoes?" He guessed. She huffed an almost laugh. "I told myself, this isn't the end. It's just the end of here. I had no idea what after looked like. I just knew I couldn't stay." "And now?" he asked. "Now I don't think in ends as much," she said. "I think in chapters. This is a new one. One I actually want to read." He rested his hands at the small of her back, anchoring her as much as himself. "Then let's not skip pages," he said. "Deal," she replied. They stood there for a while longer, the unfinished painting at their side, the city beyond the window, the weight of 3 weeks settling into something like foundation. The world outside remained what it had always been. Messy, dangerous, unpredictable. There would be more problems, more late-night calls, more moments when Lauren had to decide how much of his world she could live with, and he had to navigate the line between protecting and controlling. But the towel-wrapped woman in his bathroom had become the artist in his spare room. The man who'd once believed his penthouse was safest empty now stood in its doorway and understood, with a clarity that made his chest ache, that filling it had been the real security all along. The canvas would change. So would they. For tonight, with the smell of paint in the air and the sound of Melissa's soft snoring down the hall, it was all she needed.